Chapter 1. Nap Time. The end of summer had quickly approached, and everyone was getting ready to go back to school year routines. They buzzed around the burrow, deciding what they would need for the next year. Most would be going to Hogwarts, but Mr. Weasley, Mrs. Weasley, and Ginny were not among that group. Ginny had spent about half a semester at Hogwarts, but went home. With Harry warning people about the Muggle epidemic, students worried that they would stop believing in magic as well. Most of that had blown over, but this summer hadn't been that easy for Ginny. Percy, Fred, George, and Ron kept telling her that she should return to Hogwarts. They feared that she'd never reach her magical potential. Others tried to tell them that magic doesn't exist and that they should be more like Ginny. Hermione, however, mostly stayed out of this. She defended Ginny when she needed to, but she had mostly given up on being able to convince them that they're not magical. Hermione still loved it at the Burrow. This time she went directly from Hogwarts to the Burrow instead of going home for a little while. She sent a short letter to her parents notifying them that she was going to be with the Weasleys for another summer. Today, they would be going to London to get some school supplies for Ginny. Hogwarts is notorious for not needing anything but a skeleton. They provide clothes, books, pencils, paper, food, everything you need. Ginny would be going to a real school where she would be graded. Hermione had wanted to go to a real school, but is starting to like how easy Hogwarts is. The Weasleys and Hermione sat at a long table and ate breakfast. Ron came down the stairs looking like he hadn't gotten any sleep. His hair was messy, and he looked like he would fall over at any moment. "You look like you just got hit by a bus," George said. "What happened?" Hermione asked. "I had a nightmare about a letter that was screaming at me." He sat down at the table. "It was horrible." Hermione and most of the Weasleys snickered at his reaction to a dream about a screaming letter. "You weren't there!" "At least there weren't any spiders on the letter," Fred teased. Laughter started again, and Ron grabbed some toast and went back to his room. Hermione followed him and watched as he removed a poster from his wall and took some drugs out. "Aw, come on, Ron, they're just joking around." "Easy for you to say, they think you're perfect." "You have to admit that a dream about a scary letter is pretty funny." "It's not, and spiders aren't funny either," Ron said as he inhaled a bag of drugs. Soon breakfast ended, the chores were completed, and everyone piled into the RV and set out for London. Once they arrived, they parked the large RV in a parking lot. They got out and walked to the long street with many shops. Ron still looked like he hadn't fully woken up yet. They went through a few shops and bought various things. Ron was following behind the group, but eventually drifted away. Hermione noticed him wandering around like a lost dog and approached him. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm looking for something," he answered. Hermione watched as he walked around aimlessly. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Ron then noticed a sign and gasped. He opened his eyes wide and bolted towards a costumes shop called Ollivander's that was advertising wands 30% off. The store wasn't brightly lit and seemed almost dreary. Many racks of clothes were on one side of the room, and displays of props were on the other. The wooden floor creaked and the walls were crumbling. Ron went to the counter and rang the bell. The clerk woke up and the newspaper that was lying on him fell off. He stood up and said hello to Ron. "Is this the place Joanne recommended? Diagon Alley?" Ron asked. "Yes," the clerk exclaimed. "Really?" Hermione challenged. "You don't even need her last name? You know every Joanne?" "Well, I assume he's talking about my favorite customer." Ron looked at the wands on display. "Then can you tell me her last name?" Hermione asked. "Shame on you! I don't look at private information about my loyal customers," he exclaimed as he showed Ron the most expensive wand he had. "I assume she's a regular at this shop?" Hermione continued. "She is." "Huh, that's funny. She hasn't left her bathroom in years," Hermione informed. "That's why I make deliveries." "To Scotland," Hermione said in disbelief. "No distance is too far for my favorite customer. Though I think it's terrible that you would talk about someone behind their back like this." "I'm just calling you out on your lies." "By using someone's private information? You are a terrible person, miss." Hermione took a deep breath. "Ron, have you picked one yet?" "Yes, I want—" Before he could point, Hermione grabbed his wrist and led him out of the store. "Why'd you do that?" "I have a plan. Which one did you want?" "The 14-inch willow one." Hermione got close to the ground and peered into the shop through the open door. She watched as the clerk went back to reading his paper. "Can I borrow your drug coat?" He looked at her suspiciously as he took his coat off and gave it to her. Expecting the coat to be light, she almost dropped it as it was handed to her. "How many drugs are in here?" "A lot." She put it on and took off her shoes. She ignored Ron's bewildered face and told him to stay low and to be quiet. She stayed low and silently snuck into the store. She crept up the front of the wand display and took one of the boxes of the 14-inch willow wand. She put the box securely in the coat and made her way out of the store. Hermione made sure no one watched as she gave the box to Ron, who was giving her a look of astonishment. She put her shoes back on and gave Ron's coat back. Ron still looked shocked. Where did you learn? Why did you—" He was being rude. "And the shoes?" "To be quieter." "And how did you learn this?" Hermione didn't answer. Ron kept asking, but she wouldn't even acknowledge the question. They found the rest of the Weasleys, and no one mentioned how Ron got his new wand. The days passed, and it was time to get back to Hogwarts. Ginny's school year wouldn't start for another week, so she would be going with everyone to King's Cross Station. Mr. Weasley put the heavy trunks in the RV while Mrs. Weasley finished making some sandwiches for the train. Ron took the drugs out of the hole in his wall and put them in his trunk. Hermione came to see if he was done yet. "Are you done packing?" Ron closed his trunk as Hermione noticed Scabbers and picked him up. He made some low-pitched squeaks and tried jumping out of her hands. Hermione put Scabbers in his carrier, and they led the way for Ron in his drug trunk. They all got in the RV and sat down. Mr. Weasley got into the driver's seat and started the RV. They pulled out of the driveway and went to King's Cross Station. They walked into the train station and found the platform they needed. Harry was already there wearing a brown hat with fake teeth on it. "Cheerio, mate," he greeted. "You went to Australia for the summer?" Ron assumed. "Yep. I befriended a kangaroo and learned how to play the didgeridoo." "Aren't kangaroos dangerous?" Hermione asked. "Isn't Australia as a whole dangerous?" Ron asked. "It does rain spiders, so you wouldn't like it, Ron. However, Rue and I wiped out all the crime of Australia with Hedwig and Rock." "Have you had any more trouble with your aunt and uncle?" Hermione asked while Ron was still shuddering from the thought of spiders raining from the sky. "I wanted to bring Rue back to Britain so he could fight off Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, but they wouldn't let him on the plane. You drop-kick 3 people and they think you're dangerous. Anyway, I managed to get into my house and get my things." Harry pointed to his luggage. "Hedwig and Rock worked as a team to keep me safe from Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon." "How?" Ron asked. "Hedwig dropped Rock on their heads," Harry answered. The train arrived and everyone began boarding. Harry brought Hedwig, Rock, and a bag as carry-on. Ron had brought Scabbers, his wand, and his own bag, and Hermione brought only a small lunchbox that Mrs. Weasley had filled earlier. Dozens of passengers were walking down the aisle of their train car looking for seats. Most traveled down the train, but a few determined passengers went against the crowds and traveled up the train. They arrived at the last car, and Hedwig flew off Harry's shoulder. He picked up Rock in his talons before placing him on the table. Finally, Hedwig perched himself on Harry's shoulder. "Rock and Hedwig are best friends," Harry informed. Ron and Hermione nodded, wondering if Hedwig was just as crazy as Harry. Their thoughts were forced to change focus to a high-pitched bray. They jumped to the small platform on the back of the train and saw Mrs. Dursley madly neighing. She was riding a strange contraption along with Mr. Dursley. It was one of those seesaw things that ride along the rails. The difference was that they were sitting on plastic horses that were probably stolen from a carousel. They stopped and stood up. They each picked up a broom with a puppet horse face on the end and began running to the train. They stepped onto the platform, the massive Mr. Dursley making the students move back into the train. They began galloping in place, rolled up newspaper as their weapons. Swatting imaginary flies, they really believed they were intimidating everyone. "This is a hold-up," Mr. Dursley announced as Mrs. Dursley calmed down her braying. "Not on my watch," Harry announced as a short, round-faced, chubby kid timidly approached the platform. Harry took out his wand and pointed it at the Dursleys. The chubby kid was messing with some bolts. "Abracadabra, begone with ya!" Harry chanted. As the words left his mouth, the platform cracked off the train and fell onto the tracks. The train whistled and began moving. "Ha-ha," Harry began. "Their plan went down the tracks, thanks to me, the protector of Hogwarts." "What are you talking about?" the chubby kid asked. "I loosened the bolt. Me, Neville Longbottom." "Ron, Mud, can you believe my spell actually worked? I just made it up on the spot. I'm an amazing wizard." They pulled out of the station and started being surrounded by trees. The passengers had settled down and taken permanent seats. "Did your parents drop you off at King's Cross?" Hermione asked. "I didn't see them." "They're still in Australia," Harry answered. "They came back to bring me at the beginning of last summer, but then sent me here by myself." "Did you make all the invisible ink in Riddle's diary appear?" Ron asked, remembering the task he'd accepted last year. "Yes, I did," Harry exclaimed. "And?" Hermione asked impatiently. "This diary is intriguing for 2 reasons. Our friend Tom Riddle seems to be an artist," Harry said as he dug through his bag in search of the diary. He found it and started flipping through the pages. "He drew a lot of pictures in here." Harry had put sticky notes on each page which had something other than a recipe. Ron and Hermione leaned in to look at the diary. "Is that a self-insert?" Hermione asked as she read the notes next to the pictures. "Yes, from that book series, Dusk," Harry said. "The notes depicted Tom Riddle as the best character whom everyone loves. He never does anything wrong and always has the right answers. He also wins the heart of Belly Trumpeter, a girl who already has 2 guys who fight over her." "What a Gary Sue," Ron said in disgust. "As for the second thing," Harry's serious tone caught Ron and Hermione off guard. "He wrote a sentence." Harry flipped the pages. He arrived on the page and turned the book around to show Hermione and Ron. "Death to Hogwarts," Hermione read. "But he went to Hogwarts," Ron reminded with a confused expression. Harry left the book open on the table. "I don't know what he meant, and I don't know if this is an empty threat now that he's in jail, but it's my duty as the protector of Hogwarts to ensure the safety of the school." "We should talk to him," Hermione suggested. "Maybe being in jail will make him give us some straight answers." They tried to get their minds off of Tom Riddle as they couldn't do anything while on the train. Ron, Hermione, and Harry played games until the train arrived at Hogwarts. They got off and traveled down the long Hogsmeade Road. They followed the crowd into the stone building and walked to the sorting ceremony. They watched as Dumbledore fell down the stairs and reminisced their first day of Hogwarts 2 years ago. Just like last time, he climbed back up the stairs as everyone passed by. They all shuffled in through the doors of the cafeteria. Students scrambled to their respective houses and babbled with friends whom they had not spoken to since the previous term. Soon the large doors creaked open and the new first years nervously scuffled to the front of the room. A professor with curly blonde hair stood up from the staff table. She walked in front of the table near a stool and waited for everyone's attention. "Welcome back, most of you, and welcome to Hogwarts for our new students. I'm Professor Sybil Trelawney, and I'll be sorting you to our 4 houses using my psychic powers." Hermione rolled her eyes while Harry remembered that he had made the sorting hat quit. The professor walked back to the staff table and picked up a crystal ball. She brought it back to where she was standing and put it on the stool. Everyone except for Hermione watched her wave her hands around the crystal ball. She started listing off names and announcing their houses. As Hermione's eyes wandered around the room, she noticed that Trelawney was just reading off a list that another professor was holding for her. Before losing his spirit, the sorting hat had always used variety in how he told everyone what house they would be in. It was very apparent that Sybil Trelawney had not learned this skill yet. Each time she said the name of a student, "You'll be in," followed by one of the 4 houses. Occasionally, she would break the pattern by saying things like, "Isn't this fun?" or "Isn't this so cool?" Students who were seated began falling asleep. Harry fell asleep, and Hermione watched as Ron went into deep thought. She found this very odd since he usually takes any chance to sleep while a teacher speaks. Every student had fallen asleep, and Hermione was sure she had never heard this much snoring before. Ron stood up while Hermione watched suspiciously. He walked up to the staff table where even the professors had fallen asleep, and pulled out a small green spray bottle with a fan on it. From across the table he sprayed it in each of the professors' faces, and the fan helped it reach them. Professor Trelawney and her helper had somehow not noticed Ron spraying everyone with a green fan. Once he was finished with the staff table, he walked in front of Trelawney and sprayed her too, making her collapse on the ground. He did the same for her helper, and he also collapsed. "Wake up, everybody!" Ron yelled. "The boring storm's over!" "Did you just drug every teacher?" Hermione asked in disbelief. "Yep. I've been waiting for an excuse to use the new drugs I got. A new super powerful product from my dealer, imported from the world's drug capital, Highlando, Florida. This gas will put anyone out with a single spritz. I got the first dibs since I'm his most loyal and frequent customer." "I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified." "Stay on my good side, Hermione." As everyone awoke, including the one who was half asleep as he was being sorted, they noticed Trelawney had stopped talking to instead lie on the floor, and watched Ron climb onto a table. "Hello, I'm Ron, and I'll be sorting the rest of you. Whoever complains will get drugged." Ron pointed the bottle at the crowd. Despite being clearly threatened, the students cheered. Hermione stood up and found the paper that the professor had been reading off of. She gave it to Ron and he continued the sorting. She stood near Ron but remained on the ground. Everyone else remained seated or collapsed, but the students were getting a little more upbeat and energetic. Before anyone else could stand up, the doors to the cafeteria flew open and Professor Dumbledore walked in. He was livid. The students became silent and Ron stopped reading the list. They all turned and stared at Professor Dumbledore. "I was sitting in my office, doing my work, when I was informed of shouting coming from the sorting ceremony. Shouting coming from a student, not even a professor." He looked at Ron and Hermione as he spoke. They were the only ones standing, and they were in the center of the chaos. "You two, come with me." Chapter 2, Cardboardian Stowaways. "Good luck," Harry said quietly, feeling sorry for his friends. Ron and Hermione walked out of the room with their heads hung low. They followed Dumbledore into his office and sat down in front of his desk. We didn't do anything. They just fell asleep," Ron started. "You expect me to believe that you, Ron Weasley, the one with an entire filing cabinet and a history of drugging people, just happened to witness every teacher fall asleep?" "Well, the ceremony was really boring," Ron explained. "Boring to even the one conducting the ceremony?" Dumbledore shook his head. "And then after watching everyone fall asleep, you just felt the need to get on top of a table?" Ron said nothing and looked down at the floor. "Miss Granger, what part did you have in this?" Ron interrupted before she could say anything. "She didn't have any part. She was trying to get me to stop. But I wouldn't listen." Even though Dumbledore didn't notice Hermione's dumbfounded expression, he didn't look convinced. Still, he decided against arguing. "All right, Miss Granger, you may leave." Hermione reluctantly left the room. Ron sat, wondering what the consequence would be. Dumbledore stood and looked out the large window of his office. "Dumbledore, just imagine if me were you or you were I. I am aware of that theory, and I am not amused," Dumbledore said sternly. "I'm also signing you up for remedial English." "Aw, but I only speak American," Ron replied, trying to hold back his laughter. "I see you think this is funny," Dumbledore said with his back still turned. "It kind of is." "This behavior cannot continue. Have you anything to say for yourself?" "I plead the fifth." Fire set in Dumbledore's eyes. "We don't have a fifth!" he roared, launching to his feet. "Or a fourth, or a third, or a second, or even a first!" The headmaster sank back into his chair. "The memes." "You're a weird dude," Ron commented, hand on his chin. Dumbledore found his train of thought. "I've tried to be patient, but every time I turn you drug another professor, and this time you've drugged several. In my defense, you hire teachers like McGonagall. Stop changing the subject, we're not talking about her. This is about you and your affinity to drug people. I must take drastic measures. I'm sending you to Azkaban for 2 days. Once you return, you'll start your classes." "Azkaban? What's that?" Ron asked. "A prison on an island in the North Sea." Dumbledore made a phone call while Ron sat awkwardly, becoming more nervous by the second. Hermione and Harry sat in the common room waiting for Ron. Hermione could barely eat anything at the start of term feast since she felt guilty, and worried for Ron. Harry tried to console her by telling her that Ron had been in trouble many of times, but they both knew this time was different. Ron had never drugged this many people before, and they had never seen Dumbledore this angry before. The entire incident had shaken them both, some more evidently than others. Hermione sat with her book, trying to get the image of Dumbledore's fiery expression out of her mind. The door to the common room opened, and Hagrid entered, looking very sad. "What's wrong?" Harry asked. "Ron's on his way to Azkaban. Dumbledore told me to tell ya." Harry gasped. Hermione put her book down on the table. "What's Azkaban?" "Wizard jail, Mud," Harry answered before looking back to Hagrid. "Why would he be sent there? He just drugged some people." "Dumbledore wants this to stop. He's hoping some time in Azkaban'll teach him." "He's Ron. He'll probably get everyone addicted to drugs," Hermione protested. "That's what I told him, but he's made up his mind. 2 days in Azkaban's junior prisoner jail." Hermione was just about to fall apart. He's been sent to Wizard Juvie." It was impossible to sleep that night. Harry's heard things about Azkaban. With all the criminals, it's a dangerous place. Usually those criminals are sent to prison for life. Harry's heard about all sorts of terrible rumors. Some say the guards eat your soul and deprive you of any happy thoughts. Another popular rumor is that most of the inmates have gone mad due to the conditions. Hermione and Harry didn't need their alarm clocks. They had been wide awake for hours. With minutes of sleep under their belts, they stopped at the cafeteria and grabbed some breakfast. Then they continued their plotting to visit Ron. Frustratingly, they came up empty-handed, as students aren't supposed to leave school grounds. Harry carried around a map and tried to think of some way to get to Azkaban. As they walked along the interior of the moat, Hagrid's dog, Fang, noticed them. He ran towards them, and Hagrid followed right behind him. "What are you doing?" Hagrid asked. "Certainly not trying to get to Azkaban," Harry lied. Hermione glared at Harry. Hagrid saw past the lie, but didn't tell them to go back inside and just wait the 2 days for Ron to come back. He appeared more suspicious, more furtive. He came close to them, revealing dark circles under his eyes, and spoke quietly. "I'm sending large packages to Azkaban today. It'd be a shame if 2 students stowed away in them to get to Azkaban." Hermione couldn't help but smile. "Thanks, Hagrid." "Thanks for what? I have no idea what you're talking about." Hagrid winked. They found the packages that Hagrid was referring to and hid inside the biggest one. They waited for hours in the pitch-black box. Finally, they were moved on to a boat. The ocean made them rock back and forth in the silence of the box. They played games to pass the time, stopping whenever they heard someone. As they played the 57th round of 20 questions, they didn't hear the crew member walking down the stairs to their level. He heard their muffled voices and started walking towards the sound. Is anyone there?" Harry and Hermione stopped talking immediately and stayed silent, worrying the crew member could hear their hearts beating. "I know I heard someone. Who are you?" He didn't sound much older than them. "Box," Harry answered, hoping it will make him go away. Hermione was very skeptical of his plan and wished he had remained quiet. "Boxes can't talk. Show yourself." "I'm a magical box, and I'm very shy, so please go away," Harry continued. "Magic doesn't exist, nor do talking boxes." "If you don't do as I say, I'll have to inform the magical box king about this. He will not be pleased." "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." "You've angered our kingdom. I'm getting the king, and if he doesn't like what you say, he'll start speaking boxish. Then you won't know what he's planning your demise to be." Harry waited a minute and then changed his voice to a deep, intimidating one. "I am Cardlo Cardboard, the king of Cardboardia. We have many terrifying cardboard weapons. Have you angered my people?" The crew member cracked. No, your highness. I'll leave you and your people. Please don't start speaking boxish." They both stayed quiet for a minute. "I can't believe that worked," Hermione said. "I'm not the protector of Hogwarts for nothing. I knew exactly what I was doing." As they were being taken off the boat, they heard the same crew member saying things like, "Don't anger the Cardboardian kingdom." Harry and Hermione almost couldn't keep themselves from laughing. They were carried into a building and left on the floor. Carefully, they climbed out of the box. They left the area and tried to find out how to visit people. They found a waiting room and got the attention of the secretary behind a glass window in the wall. Her black hair was pulled into a bun, and she barely moved her head to look at them. Her glasses were at the end of her nose, and she looked very uptight and annoyed. Ugh, children. Inmates are visitors. Aren't the inmates supposed to be locked up? Hermione asked. Inmates or visitors? She repeated a little more impatiently. Visitors, Harry answered, hoping she always got that response. Ugh, visitors. Who would you like to see? She sighed. Ron Weasley, Hermione answered. Ugh, Ron Weasley. I hate druggies. He's in the junior prisoner section. Follow the signs. You can read, can't you? She looked back down at her work and slid the sliding window shut. Go away. She motioned them to leave with her pen. Harry and Hermione were shocked at how rude the secretary was. Harry read her name tag. Guinevere. 1 out of 5 stars. Just wait till your boss hears about my review. Yelp, yelp, yelp. She appeared not to have heard him. She glanced up to see Harry and Hermione still standing there. Get, she shouted. Only a muffled voice came through the glass, but they still left. They followed the signs and walked through the building. The walls of the prison were grimy gray stone, light bulbs were out everywhere, a lot of seats were broken, and the entire building felt cold and unwelcoming. They sat down in a visitor's window and waited for Ron. A pile of pieces of broken chairs sat in a corner gathering dust. The windows had bars instead of glass, though the shards of glass around the edges makes it seem probable that glass was once on all of them. A guard brought Ron into the room and then stood at the door. Ron sat in front of Harry and Hermione. Hey guys, how'd you get all the way up here? Ron asked. It's a long story involving a lot of cardboard, Hermione answered. Have the guards been stealing your soul? Harry asked. No, I'm practically running this place. Huh? Hermione responded. I've been telling everyone stories about how I drugged a bunch of professors, and they think I'm the coolest person ever. Plus, the guards are super lame. Harry took a closer look at the guard. He wore a long black cloak. The hood came down over his eyes and nose, the sleeves came down over his hands, and the cloak dragged on the floor. To Harry, this monster was incredibly creepy. There might just be a skeleton under that cloak. The 3 of them heard from one of the floors above. They then heard screaming, and the guard near them left the room. What? Harry asked. Oh yeah, that happens sometimes. I'm not sure why, Ron answered. They talked for a while and then found out about a few of the inmates. They knew several of them. Dobby was here for assault, and Gilderoy Lockhart was here for breaking and entering. Apparently, he had been trying to plant his books in people's houses along with lots of other merchandise. He claimed it wasn't stealing since he left something of, quote, higher value. Another name that piqued their interest was Tom Riddle. They definitely wanted to talk with him. Tom Riddle's in the real jail. You'll have to go to a different visitor's room. He gave them directions and they left to go find him. I wonder if we'll see my uncle, Harry said as they walked. Your Uncle Vernon? I hope not, Hermione replied. No, my other uncle, Uncle Sirius. He's not really my uncle. He's one of my dad's old friends. But he hasn't come to visit ever since he murdered 12 muggles and one of his best friends. Hermione looked slightly revolted. That's horrible. They arrived at their destination and asked for Tom Riddle. The guard brought him in and waited at the door. Tom Riddle sat down in the seat before the window. Ugh, you. Why does everyone hate us? Harry whined. Are you plotting anything? Hermione asked. If I was, do you think I would tell you? Tom Riddle jabbed. Well, I didn't want to have to do this, but... Harry held up Tom's diary. We'll tell everyone about your creepy self-insert. Harry showed him the pictures he had drawn. How did you? Next time you should think about using magic to hide writing or drawing, Harry suggested. Hermione took the diary from Harry and flipped to the page that said Death to Hogwarts. What does this mean? Tom crossed his eyes, leaned back, and said nothing. Hermione looked at the book and remembered what happened when she put a branch through it. She looked in one of the corners of the room and noticed another pile of broken chairs. She took a metal leg of a chair and went back to Tom. Your diary has a hole in it. How about a second? Hermione started poking the book. No! Tom screamed. Fine, I'll tell you if you give me my journal back. Harry and Hermione looked at the book. They were confident there weren't any secrets left, so they reluctantly agreed. If you answer all of our questions completely, Harry added. Deal. Really quick, why did you kill Dumsley? Harry asked. Have you tried getting work done in a forest with an annoying fat brat poking you with a tree branch? So I poked him with a tree branch. Harder. I understand that, but murder is never the answer, smoking citizen. I'm willing to bet you've tried to kill him before. That's not the point. What does Death to Hogwarts mean? Hermione asked. Tom Riddle sighed. We were planning on burning the castle down. We decided against it, though. Petrol is expensive. We? Harry asked. Who else was planning this? Hermione demanded. Tom Riddle kept his mouth shut. Hermione stabbed the book. Tom winced, but still remained silent. Hermione pulled the metal leg back to stab the book again when Tom said something. I've changed my mind. You can keep it. I cannot tell any more secrets. My mind is my chamber of secrets, and I shouldn't have revealed what I did. Hermione ripped some of the diary's pages, tore the cover, bent it in half, but each time she damaged the diary, it seemed to have less and less of an effect on him. Harry gave up and told Hermione they should leave. Hermione didn't want to, but she knew they wouldn't get any more information out of him. They started walking down the halls to get back to Ron, disappointed that they couldn't tell him much. On their way, they started hearing barking. It was a lot more than when they first heard it. The barking wouldn't stop. Guards ran all over the place looking terrified. Some cowered in corners and others left the building. The halls were filled with screams from guards wearing long black cloaks. A siren was soon added to the mix of loud noises and chaos broke out. The halls became a swirl of black cloaks as Hermione and Harry tried to get out of the way and think of what to do. The guards were very rude and hindered Harry and Hermione's escape. They were pushed into a small cubby off the narrow hall. It looked like a supplies closet minus the door. There were some brooms, mops, buckets, and many different types of soap. The barking got louder, and so did the screams. "Uncle Sirius!" Harry exclaimed. "What?" Hermione looked around and spotted an inmate with long, unkempt, curly brown hair and a mustache. He was the source of the barking. The guards ran away from the barking inmate. "We have to get out of here!" Harry stood close to the outside of the little cubby. "We should—" Harry was pulled into the crowd and carried off in the swarm of guards before he could finish his sentence. "Harry!" Hermione shouted. Sirius came closer and closer to Hermione. She tried to get out, but she wasn't as lucky as Harry. Hermione waited for a break in the crowd, but the guards kept coming. As she watched the hallway, she accidentally made eye contact with Sirius. He gave a creepy smile before Hermione left beside the doorway and into a corner. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily and hoping he would ignore her. She heard the last of the guards run by and the footsteps of Sirius. He stopped barking and walked towards the cubby. He stopped and looked in. Hermione was standing outside the viewpoint of the doorway, her heart beating faster than it ever had before. She held her breath as she heard him walk closer. He stepped into the cubby and Hermione screamed. Chapter 3. Prison Break. "A little late, is that you?" he asked. Hermione stood frozen, terror in her eyes, her mind racing. "Come out of that dark closet so I can see you better." Before Hermione's brain could register what was happening, she had been brought into the hallway. "It is you! I haven't seen you since you were just a year old." Hermione stood speechless as the escaped murderer tried to have a conversation with her. "Where are my manners? You probably don't know me. I'm Sirius Black. Your family and I go way back. We still keep in touch to this day. They've been sending family photos, and when I recognized you, I just had to say hello." Murderer," Hermione stammered. His friendly expression turned into a serious one. "I didn't kill anyone. That's why your parents have been helping me plan my escape." His sudden outburst made Hermione jump. "Oh, sorry, I have a condition." "Padfoot?" Hermione croaked. "That's me. My code name, anyway. Your parents talked about me with you?" "They spoke extremely highly of you." They hadn't talked about him very often, but when they did, they acted like he was a saint for reasons still unknown to Hermione. "Ah, well, I did babysit you a lot until I was, arrested and all. And they're great mentors, even though I'm not doing their line of work." Sirius looked around. "We better get out of here. These sirens are really loud and ear health is important." He dragged Hermione outside as she was still shaking from the terrifying experience. "Mud!" Harry yelled as he ran to Hermione and Sirius. "I thought those creepy cloak things would have killed you. You're okay, right?" Hermione nodded. A few of the guards started to walk towards Sirius to recapture him. Sirius barked a few times and sent them running to the boats. "Uncle Sirius! My dad talks about you all the time!" "Harry Potter!" Sirius exclaimed. "You look just like your father. I would have loved to have spent more time with you, but unfortunately, I was arrested." One brave guard snuck up behind Sirius and tried to tie his hands together. Sirius barked really loud and started to growl. The guard took off and jumped onto a boat that was just leaving. "Those are Dementors," Sirius explained. "They're afraid of dogs. They lose their heads if anyone barks a few times. Dimwits." "How'd you find that out?" Hermione asked. "Well, I sometimes bark a little, but one time I was in front of a whole fleet of Dementors. They all took off running. It was hilarious. Then I just barked whenever they annoyed me." "All of them are afraid of dogs?" Hermione repeated in disbelief. Someone walked towards the group, but this time they weren't a Dementor. "Boo," said a familiar redhead. Hermione turned to look at the person. "Ron? How did you get out of jail?" "The Dementors left. I got bored, so I escaped. Plus the sirens are really loud. A couple of other inmates had the same idea. I know that a few of them are going to try and turn off the sirens." "Prisoners are escaping!" Harry shouted. "Never fear, citizens. I'll fix this." Harry ran to the big doors of Azkaban and locked them. "Problem solved. Roll the credits." "But guess what?" Ron continued. "I found out a bunch of cool stuff. Back in the 50s, there was this big secret American government experiment where they paid 60 people to move to this island. And get ready for the twist. They pumped drugs into the air." "What?" Hermione objected. "That's ridiculous." No, it's true," Ron insisted despite the group's doubt. No one knows for sure what happened. We think the government forgot about the whole operation. And do you know what that means? Ron waited expectantly for guesses to leave his friends' mouths. The experiment failed? Harry suggested. No, much better. It's possible there are still drugs being pumped into the atmosphere to this day. Many druggists have spent their lives searching for the island, but no one's found it. Yet. I want to be the one to find it, even if it takes me my entire adult life. Hermione put a hand on Ron's shoulder. Well, good luck searching for Atlantis. Druglantis, Ron corrected. Sirius began stumbling towards the ocean. Let's find a boat so we can get out of this dreadful place. Whoa, not so fast, Hermione interrupted. We're not helping a prisoner escape. Come on, Mud, he's not a killer. Harry had always been good at judging people's character. He's always thought the imprisonment of Sirius Black was unjust. He used to be friends with Harry's dad. You can't just go from being a friendly person to someone who kills more than a dozen people. Harry's dad feels the same way. He could never believe Sirius would do something like this. Harry would have pled for Sirius's innocence in court, but there was no trial. Also, he was a baby and he couldn't form words. If I was a killer, I'd be killing you guys right now and hopping on one of these boats. But I'm not. Not yet, anyway. Anyone know where I can find that dirty rat that did kill those people? He's still out there, and he could be planning another 12 murders right now. I fear for you guys. Fine, Hermione agreed. Just know that we're friends with a half-giant who wields a crossbow. I'm coming too, right? Ron asked. Yes, Harry answered. We'll have to hide you from Dumbledore. They didn't come to Azkaban to help prisoners escape, but things just turned out this way. Harry assumed they were going to stay until Ron was let out, but this works too. They searched for a boat to aid them in their escape. They decided it would be best if the escapees hid in boxes. Sirius and Ron each found a box and climbed in. Harry and Hermione found a boat that was going back to Hogwarts and asked the captain if they could come along. Thankfully, he agreed, and they got on the boat with their 2 boxes. They planned on staying in the cargo hold for the trip with Ron and Sirius, but the crew was too nice and insisted they at least come up to eat dinner with them. They tried to get out of it, but eventually agreed. Harry and Hermione hadn't eaten since breakfast. They said they'd be up in a minute, since Harry had to explain some things to them. If anyone hears you, simply tell them you're talking boxes from Cardboardia. The king's name is Carlo Cardboard, and he can speak Boxish. We'll bring you some food once we're done, Hermione said before she and Harry climbed up the stairs. They walked to a table where the entire crew sat. Lots of food was on the table, and the captain invited them to sit down. As our guests, you should enjoy yourselves. You don't have to sit in the cargo hold for the trip. We don't want to bother you, Hermione said politely. The crew members chatted away about boats and oceans. Harry and Hermione were left out, but they didn't mind. Towards the end of the meal, a young crew member whose tired face conflicted his bright, wide eyes excused himself to retrieve his hat, which he had forgotten in the cargo hold. Harry and Hermione got a little nervous and hoped Ron and Sirius would remember to be quiet. There is no way anyone else would believe in magical talking boxes. They watched his longish, straggly brown hair glide in the breezes of the ocean. Doesn't his voice sound like the one we tricked on our way to Azkaban? Harry asked. Yeah. You don't think it's him, do you? Maybe. It's possible. What was his name again? Oscar Pilot, I believe? A few minutes later, Oscar ran back to the group. The kingdoms are at war! The crew gave him confused looks. The boxes are fighting! They're speaking Boxish and everything! This magical box nonsense again! There's no such thing, the captain huffed. Actually, talking boxes are our specialty, Harry said. That's why we want to spend our time in the cargo hold. We're doing research on these talking boxes and their kingdom. We should really try and settle this war. With no boxes, there's nothing to research, Hermione said as she and Harry stood up. There were already an endangered species, so excuse us, Harry added. They rushed to the cargo hold with Oscar. They stopped on the stairs and watched 2 boxes bumping into each other. Boxes should only use cardboard as materials, Ron yelled. We should improve as a society and use other things like plastic and rubber, Sirius shouted back. Cardboard is easily recyclable, not to mention its flammability. How can you keep warm by the fire if the smell of burning rubber and plastic is in the air? I will not tolerate your cannibalistic ideologies. Box, ox, ox, box, ox, boxy. Ox, box, boxing, ox, box. Oscar gasped. They're speaking Boxish again! Sirius bellowed. Is that angry or Boxish? Yes, citizen. Don't worry, we can speak Boxish. You go and get them some food while we try and calm them down, Harry instructed. Of course, anything for the people of Cardboard. I'll be happy to get food for the kings of Cardboardia and Boxopolis. After he left, Hermione and Harry walked over to Ron and Sirius. Guys, he's gone, Hermione said above the sound of boxes crashing into each other. That was awesome, Ron exclaimed. Sorry about, barking. I can't help it. It's okay, Uncle Sirius. We all have our quirks. Some food is on the way, so he'll be back, Harry informed. We have to make it look like we helped settle your argument, so no fighting, Hermione added. Got it, Sirius agreed. Soon Oscar came back with 2 plates of food. He was hesitant of where to put them, but settled on putting each one on the ground in front of the boxes. Thank you. You are welcome to the kingdom of Cardboardia any time, Ron invited. And the kingdom of Boxopolis, Sirius added. I'm honored, Oscar said before scurrying off. Harry and Hermione gave the plates to Ron and Sirius, and they ate quickly. Once they got back to Hogwarts, it was dark out. The crew helped get the boxes off the boat and even brought them into the common room per the King of Cardboardia's request. They said goodbye and left. The common room was usually empty since Ron had annoyed everyone who used the room. Now they try to spend as little time there, especially when Ron's around. Sirius and Ron got out of their boxes and stood up. Sirius decided it was time for him to leave and hide on his own. After taking a long rope out of the box, he thanked them for helping him escape, and then he walked across the room and opened a window. He tied the rope securely on the outside of the window and waved before lowering himself down to the castle roof. From there, he jumped to the lower roofs and got onto the ground. Do you think we'll ever see him again? Harry asked. I reckon he'll leave the country for good. I wouldn't want to go back, Ron said. Actually, I rocked at jail, so I wouldn't mind it. One escapee is out of their hands, but they still have Ron. He's not supposed to be at Hogwarts for another day. Before they could smuggle Ron up the stairs and into his and Harry's dormitory, Hermione remembered something. What about your roommates? Harry looked confused. Oh, right. Maybe Hagrid will hide him, Hermione suggested quietly. He did help us get to Azkaban, Harry reminded. I'll get my invisibility cloak. He dashed up the stairs and returned with an old blanket that he insisted could make people invisible. It was black with a greenish tint and had many holes and tears. It looked like it had been mended many times before, since there were several patches of fabric sewn in. Ron put the blanket over him, completely believing it would make him invisible. As they walked to Hagrid's hut, they were given several odd looks. Hagrid opened the door and immediately noticed Ron. I allowed you to go to Azkaban, not bring back a prisoner as a souvenir. Harry laughed. Silly Hagrid, we brought 2 back. What? Don't worry, Harry said. My Uncle Sirius would never kill anyone. You let Sirius Black escape? Hagrid roared. Have you any idea how dangerous he is? Who he's got ties to and how many people he's killed? He looked around for a paper and quill. He brought them to a table and didn't bother sitting down as he began to write. What are you doing? Ron asked. I'm writing a letter to Azkaban. They probably won't even know he's missing. It's the worst jail and at the same time it's the best one. The quill attacked the paper, moving across each line unsteadily but quickly. He didn't even have a trial, Harry argued. He didn't need one, Hagrid snapped. It's unjust and Harry knows it, but he won't be able to change Hagrid's mind. He can only hope that his uncle knows what he's doing. Arguing or even standing by his opinion would be pointless. A better idea would be to stay on Hagrid's side and try to get more information. You're right. We're sorry. We've made a terrible mistake. Hagrid folded the paper. He sent it off with an owl and then started another letter. This one's to Dumbledore. I need to let him know there's an escaped prisoner on the loose. Harry waited a moment before speaking again. Since you disagreed with Dumbledore's decision about Ron, do you think he could stay here until he's officially released from Azkaban? Hagrid looked at Ron. All right, if you help me with my jobs around here. I've been very busy lately. Okay, Hermione agreed slowly. But I'm not telling anyone they're a wizard. Harry and Hermione went back to Gryffindor Tower and went to sleep. They got up the next morning and got ready to help Hagrid out. Throughout the day, they fed several of Hagrid's pets, watered countless plants, did some farming, and organized a box of keys. Sunday night had come, and Ron would be free once the boat from Azkaban arrived. Strangely, with the boat came dozens of Dementors. Harry's concern grew when he watched the boat leave without them. When Harry woke the next morning, he had one wish. He wished that things would go back to normal. Before the year even started, Ron drugged a bunch of professors and was arrested. They found their way to a prison island, they helped Sirius Black escape, and they became mini-gamekeepers. Harry and Ron met with Hermione in the common room and they went to breakfast. Things seemed to be normal, which relieved all of them. No escaped prisoners, no jails, no gardening for someone so they'll hide your friend. Everything is normal. Just as Harry, Hermione, and Ron were enjoying the calmness, a swarm of people in black cloaks rushed into the room. Harry dropped his fork onto his plate. Oh, come on! The cloaked things ran around disturbing everyone until Dumbledore walked in and told all of them to be quiet. Due to the security breach in the prison of Azkaban, Hogwarts will be heightening our security. These fearless people are called Dementors, and they are here to protect everyone. Ron smiled mischievously. Bark, bark. Faster than they entered, the Dementors raced out of the room screaming, and the cafeteria erupted with laughter. 50 points from Gryffindor, Dumbledore announced sternly before leaving the room. At least this will stop Ron's dealer from delivering drugs here, Hermione said. Nah, my dealer has been through all sorts of security, and he's never failed to bring me what I need once. I even got drugs in Azkaban. Then, for some extra cash, I sold them to the other prisoners. I started a whole underground drug highway. I even had tunnels built. Everyone was high and I got rich. Hermione's face became a fusion of shock, disappointment, and confusion. You were only there for 1 day! After breakfast, they went to their first class. They all sat down and waited for Professor Snape to speak. Hello, class. Welcome to Cooking 3. This year, we will be introducing microwaves. Snape's bat, Darthwing, nodded, validating his snide owner. Last year and the year before that, Aurora Sinistra taught cooking, while Severus Snape taught snake studies in Slytherin. Everyone in the class found the change of teachers odd. Harry raised his hand. Why are you here, snaky citizen? I teach cooking, Snape answered. You teach snake people about snakes, Ron reminded. My protégé graduated and eagerly took on the task to teach his younger peers. He turned towards the rest of the class. I'd like you all to get a copy of Microwave History and a copy of Microwave Lifestyle from the bookshelf. These will be your textbooks for this year, so write your name inside the cover. The class got up and shuffled to the shelves. Microwave History had an old-timey picture of an old dude in an old-fashioned microwave. The second book, Microwave Lifestyle, showed a red, white, and blue microwave that was shinier than a brand-new mirror. Standing on top of it was a triumphant bald eagle that was somehow holding machine guns. The background contained more explosions than Michael Boone's newest movie. Twinkies and McClown's burgers were scattered around the cover as well. There was also a small blurb about how portable microwaves are the greatest thing since the Second Amendment. A small student was squeaking her reservations for the curriculum. I don't want to eat like an American. I don't want to use one of those special motor carts at the store. Hermione brought her 2 books back and dropped them on her desk. After sitting down in her chair and leaning back, she pulled out some sunglasses from her bag. She put them on as she placed her feet on her desk. Maud, what are you doing? Harry asked as he sat down and started writing his name in one of the books. I don't care, Hermione exclaimed. They don't grade us, so I don't care. I used to be all studious when I went to real school, but now I see that I was wrong. Not caring about school is awesome. Ron thought. He pushed the books off his desk and they landed with an unpleasant thud. As everyone looked back to find the source of the noise, Ron put his feet on the desk. Hermione handed him some extra sunglasses from her bag. Welcome to the life. Snape seemed to be angry, but he didn't say anything. Harry decided to pay attention, unlike Ron and Hermione. After cooking, they headed outside for Care of Magical Creatures. It's a new class that had never existed before this year. Hagrid and Fang left the house and greeted the students. Are you a teacher now? Harry asked Hagrid. Yep, he answered. Professor Dumbledore has been thinking of adding this class for a while now. You have the necessary degrees and licenses, right? Hermione asked. Hagrid laughed. When you're friends with the headmaster, you don't need degrees and licenses. Hermione looked horrified, but then she started shaking her head. You know what? It's fine. I don't care about school anymore. You do you, Hagrid. The new professor led them to a fenced-in area full of horses. As they entered the paddock, Hagrid pointed to one that was wearing cardboard wings. This is Buckbeak. He's a hippogriff. Ron started. That's a horse with fake wings. Don't tell him that, Hagrid snapped. He's always wanted to be a hippogriff. On his way from the forest, Draco Malfoy walked towards the paddock, carrying several snakes. He started laughing at the sight of the strange hippogriff. You silly simpletons. I understand you aren't from the prestigious House of Slytherin, but I thought you would be able to realize that horses with fake wings are just horses. Malfoy walked into the fenced area and started to take off the wings. Hagrid picked up Malfoy and put him down outside the fence. 100 points from Slytherin, Hagrid growled. Don't you know anything? Slytherin is out of the competition since we won every year. I'm telling Daddy about this, and he'll get you fired. I wouldn't count on that, Hagrid replied. I would. He'll also have that horse with wings executed. There's no way I'll let that happen, Hagrid roared. We'll see. Goodbye, academically challenged students. He glared at Ron with pure hatred. Ron? What did I do? Ron asked. You're a ginger, and I recently learned that Ireland has no snakes. You don't understand. I'm Canadian, eh? Ron protested as Malfoy walked away. I thought he was a nice snake boy, Harry whispered to Hermione and Ron. It's like he joined some kind of evil cult, Hermione whispered back. Chapter 4, Dobby Returns. Their next class was with Professor McGonagall. They finished lunch and walked to her classroom. Hoping to leave with all of their bones, they entered recycling class. They walked in and took their seats. The nervous students were relieved to see that McGonagall hadn't arrived yet. The bell rang and she still wasn't there. They waited a few moments in bliss until a grey tabby cat wandered in. Harry gasped. "McGonagall's turned into a cat! Or no, she's been transforming into a cat for years and none of us knew!" Dumbledore rushed into the room and picked up the cat. "Cats are very fast, and they don't fall downstairs," he huffed as he caught his breath. "I'll write your name on the chalkboard for you." He wrote the name Professor McGonagall in big letters. "She really has turned into a cat," Ron realized. "That's ridiculous. I'm sure there's a logical explanation," Hermione stated. "Like what?" Harry asked. "Professor McGonagall was replaced with a cat named Professor McGonagall?" "That's exactly what happened," Dumbledore said as he put the chalk down. "We needed a teacher for this class, so we strolled on down to Hagrid's house and named the least threatening animal we could find Professor McGonagall." "See? Perfectly logical," Hermione chimed. "That's not logical," Ron argued. "Why would you hire a cat?" "Budget cuts," Dumbledore answered. "Where's the real McGonagall?" Harry asked suspiciously. "She's around." "I still think she's the cat," Harry said. "She's definitely the cat, Broseph," Ron agreed. "How could McGonagall turn into a cat?" Hermione asked. "Magic, duh," Harry answered. Dumbledore left the room, and the class stared at the cat as she walked around the room. She jumped onto the windowsill and went to sleep in the sun. Soon every person in the room was asleep. Their last class of the day was wand safety. Gilderoy Lockhart taught wand safety last year, but he quit and went into the robbery business. He wasn't good at that either, so he ended up in jail. This year's wand safety teacher is Remus Lupin. Hermione and Ron put their sunglasses on and ignored him as he spoke. Harry listened and even took notes. Professor Lupin showed them a magical box that could show your greatest fear. He explained that it pertained to wand safety because a wizard who uses a wand must not be afraid of anything. Harry's not sure about that reason, but he's happy to not have to learn another 5 ways to make a wand safe. After Lupin talked about the box for a while longer, he invited students to give it a try. Due to Ron and Hermione's rebel attitude, he called them up first. "While you look into this box, think of your greatest fear and then say it out loud." Hermione rolled her eyes under her sunglasses. "Are you even trying to trick us into thinking this is magic?" Lupin ignored her as Ron jumped back. "I see a spider!" "Ridiculous! It's just a black box! Your turn, Miss Granger!" "Okay, fine." Hermione looked into the black box. "I see a rule book. Rebel life forever." Lupin sighed. "Mr. Potter, you've been waiting eagerly. What do you see?" Harry hopped to the front of the room and looked into the box. "Ah!" he screamed. "Dementor!" Ever since he saw the creepy cloaks that concealed their faces, Harry thought they were the scariest things he's ever seen. Unfortunately for him, a Dementor heard Harry scream and ran in to see what was going on. Since he was holding nachos, his hands were visible and they looked normal. Harry sighed with relief as he thought they would have skeleton hands. The Dementor ate a chip and started whining. "Sirius Black's not in here! Why'd you call me?" "Sorry," Lupin apologized. The Dementor stole a chair from a student. "I'm just gonna chill here in your classroom for a while." Professor Lupin stopped being friendly. The Dementor screamed and ran out of the room. The class cheered and laughed. "Wow, you sounded just like a dog," Ron complimented. "Yeah, and it's not even a full moon," Lupin laughed. The class stared at him suspiciously until he changed the subject. As the weeks went by, the Dementors somehow became more and more annoying, and students and teachers started barking at them. Recycling class became unofficially known as Naptime, and Hermione and Snape started to really dislike one another. Both would mock each other behind the other's back. It was very immature on Snape's part, but it's not all that mature on Hermione's part either. Since the Dementors were so terrible, Dumbledore hired a new fleet of guards that were professional and skilled. They stealthily hid in the shadows, watching for trouble. Nothing got past them. Despite being replaced, the Dementors wouldn't leave. The new guards clashed with the Dementors and their lazy attitude. The guards wouldn't start fights or anything, but like most students, they hated the Dementors. Late in the evening on Halloween night, an angry man with long blonde hair came to Hogwarts Castle. As the students tried to trick-or-treat, they turned to watch the man walk through the halls as he marched to Dumbledore's office. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed him to see what he was doing. They waited outside the office and tried to listen in. "I can't hear anything," Ron said as he pressed his ear against the door. "Me either," Harry said. They heard footsteps from behind them. "Someone's coming," Hermione warned. They darted to the side of the hallway, and Harry put his invisibility cloak over everyone. Hermione peered out of one of the holes in the blanket and watched. "Who is it?" Harry whispered. "It's Hagrid. He's opening the door." "He just walked in," Hermione answered. They left the cloak on the ground and ran back to the door. They each tried to listen to what the 3 people in the office were saying. "You need to do something about your professors. Read this letter," a voice they had heard before directed. "This is about a teacher you hired." There was a long silence as Dumbledore presumably read the letter.
Mr. Malfoy, I know my professors, and I especially know Hagrid. This seems highly unlike him.
Are you calling me a liar? Mr. Malfoy said.
No, of course not. Maybe it was just embellished. Draco is very young after all,
Dumbledore suggested.
Can I see the letter?
Hagrid asked.
My son wrote exactly what happened. He is not like your other immature students. He is part of the House of Slytherin. How many snake diseases have they cured? 56,
Dumbledore answered.
While most Slytherin students are brilliant academically, some aren't very responsible,
Hagrid started,
especially when they're upset. Excuse me? What are you implying?
Mr. Malfoy growled.
I was there,
Hagrid reminded.
This letter he sent. I never threw him, and none of me animals attacked him. You read the part about me saying fee-fi-fo-fum? Rubbish! He's not telling the truth. Probably 'cause the truth won't get me fired. I believe Hagrid. He is an adult while Draco is only a child,
Dumbledore said.
An adult?
Mr. Malfoy snapped.
At least my child can speak properly. Actually, Malfoy, no he can't,
Hagrid said savagely.
I'll have all of you fired. You will regret slandering my son very soon. Hogwarts is a private organization,
Dumbledore informed.
Hagrid and I have the highest authority, which means I can ask you to leave, and if you'd like, you may take your son with you. You'll pay for what you've done,
Mr. Malfoy threatened. There was a short silence while Mr. Malfoy probably glared at them, and then someone started walking to the door. Harry, Hermione, and Ron darted back under the blanket and watched Mr. Malfoy angrily stomp out. Hagrid and Dumbledore have the highest authority? Hermione repeated. But he's the gamekeeper. If he had that much power, why doesn't he help out Dumbledore as his job? Well, now he's a professor, Harry reminded. It is weird, Ron agreed. They don't know a lot about the founding of Hogwarts. They don't know why it was founded or even who built it. They decided to leave before they got caught and started walking down the dry ice-filled hallways. They walked around for a while, enjoying the Hogwarts Halloween decorations. They would be taken down by the morning, and then they wouldn't see them for another year. Hedwig joined them, carrying an old letter in his mouth. Since Hedwig loves delivering flowers, Hagrid made him a mail carrier costume. He was dressed in red and had a small red shoulder bag. When the bag was first put on him, he almost fell over due to being a little heavier on one side. He got accustomed to it and flew alongside Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They passed by Moaning Joanne's bathroom and said hi. She continued to cry as they left her hallway. Later on, they decided to go to bed. Harry was in deep thought as he and Ron entered their dormitory. If this started from the incident on the first day of classes, then why would Lucius Malfoy arrive to discuss the letter 2 months later? Harry asked. Ron yawned. Maybe it took Malfoy a long time to write a coherent letter, and to think of a story that would get Hagrid fired. Plus, for the ambiance of Halloween night. Harry nodded and then went to sleep. He woke up to the sound of Ron rummaging through drawers. Harry rubbed his eyes and put his glasses on. He had just gotten them this year. They're shiny and new and not broken. Code red, Ron muttered. Ron? Are you high? Harry asked. Ron said nothing as he kept opening more drawers. Harry ignored him and got up. Ron seemed to snap out of it, and he joined Harry out the door on his way to breakfast. The temperatures dropped over the next few weeks, and the Halloween decorations turned into Christmas decorations. Harry and Hermione finished eating lunch and left the cafeteria. They walked down the hallway towards their next class. Ron rushed down the hall and caught up with them. Mind telling us where you've been going? Hermione asked. Is this the 4th or 5th time this week you've been missing for hours? Harry asked. I don't keep track of that stuff, Ron answered. Harry Potter! Harry Potter! A strange voice said. Harry stopped walking. Shh! Ron and Hermione turned and looked at him. Harry tried to figure out where the voice was coming from. Harry Potter! Harry got on the floor and listened. Hermione and Ron watched with bewildered expressions. Harry? Hermione said. I hear someone! Someone's saying my name! He's gone schizo! Ron yelled. No, wait, I hear it too, Hermione said. Not you two! I must be next! Ron shouted. Yep, I hear it. Harry Potter, Harry Potter. A short man they immediately recognized was walking towards them. Dobby must protect. Precious. Stay away, Dobby, Hermione demanded. Ron bites. It's true. My spirit animal is a Jack Russell Terrier, Ron confirmed. How'd you get out of jail, tiny citizen? Harry asked as they all backed away. The jailbreak. The one when Sirius Black escaped. Then Dobby plotted many ways to keep Harry Potter safe. Dobby will keep you safe over the long Christmas break when all of your friends are at the Weasley household. Dobby started to laugh creepily. Harry shook his head. I'm going to Australia over Christmas break. That is incorrect, sir. Dobby read the letter from your parents. Dobby held out a folded letter. Harry grabbed the letter from him and unfolded it. Dear Harry, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon have located us and we are no longer safe here in Australia. Stay with your friends this Christmas. We'll see you again in the summer. Love, Mum and Dad, Harry muttered. How could they have found them? It should have taken them at least a few more years. Dobby ignored Harry's questions. Last year, Dobby heard Mr. Malfoy talking about Harry Potter. Dobby needed to protect. Dobby did protect. Person got arrested and now cannot harm Harry Potter. But Harry Potter is not safe. Dobby now knows that Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon are trying to harm Harry Potter. Dobby must protect. What exactly did you hear Malfoy say? Ron asked. Now that Dobby doesn't work for Lucius Malfoy anymore, he can tell you. Mr. Malfoy was on the phone with Tom Riddle. Dobby only heard Mr. Malfoy's end of the call. He said, Well, I suppose the bar has a new high for your danger. His cousin, Harry Potter, had better be hopeful you don't kill him out of spite. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged curious looks. Dobby doesn't trust Tom Riddle. Tom Riddle lies. Tom Riddle is very bad. Tom Riddle is arrested now, but he is still bad. He will plot revenge. He can't do anything from Azkaban, Harry said as Hermione and Ron looked worried for the security of Azkaban. All anyone needs to do is bark a few times. And there can't be that many Dementors left. Most of them are still at Hogwarts annoying everyone. Hospital wing is safe. Dobby will send Harry Potter and his friends to the hospital wing. Hermione, Harry, and Ron started running to their next class. They ran into cooking class and closed the door behind them. Professor Snape's long black robes dragged on the floor as he walked to the door. You're late, he said sternly. We can explain, Harry huffed. An elf is trying to kill us, Ron said. Snape rolled his eyes and directed them to their seats. Harry and Ron started walking to their desks, but Hermione didn't move. It's true! There's a short purple man and he's trying to kill us! Sit down, Miss Granger, Snape instructed. Always such a disruption. Hermione glared at Snape as she walked to her seat. Perfectly calm and collected, Snape began his lesson. We will be making microwave birthday cake. Birthdays are joyous events that are usually celebrated with parties, presents, and cake. Any idiot could throw a party and buy a gift, but not everyone can bake a cake. Everyone, open your microwave lifestyle textbooks to page 147 and gather the necessary ingredients. Students began flipping the pages while Hermione looked in a real cookbook for what she'd be making. As soon as the rustle of textbook pages calmed down, students stood up and moved in a large group to collect the first ingredient. They would stay in the large group and move around the room, getting each item. Not wanting to be part of the mass of students, Harry, Hermione, and Ron gathered their ingredients in the opposite order. They don't get trampled and they can get what they need faster. The classroom was filled with mini kitchens. 3 students were assigned to each one. Harry, Hermione, and Ron returned to their mini kitchen and started the recipes. Harry always follows the directed recipe very closely while Hermione and Ron do their own thing. They've never followed Snape's instructions. Instead, they drop food on the floor for Snape to clean up, they use food coloring, they take a nap, or they follow a different recipe entirely. At the beginning of the year, Ron would even put drugs in his dishes. A few weeks ago, Hermione was looking around the room and found a real cookbook. Occasionally, she'd make a recipe from the book. Whenever she turned on the stove or oven, several students would watch in amazement. Over the 3 years of cooking, they never even considered using those appliances. In the first year, they focused on raw recipes that didn't need anything but forks, spoons, and knives. Small knives that were more like butter knives. Last year, they worked with blenders and made all sorts of smoothies and milkshakes. When Hermione completed the recipe, she would give it to Ron and Harry for them to wolf down. Hermione and most students didn't eat in class since it was just after breakfast. However, Harry and Ron were never full, so they always happily ate whatever she gave them. This time, Hermione decided to make a simple sandwich. She already got the ingredients she needed, so she started putting the sandwich together. Ron walked across the room to sit on Snape's desk. He would survey the room and warn of fires. Surprisingly, it was a very necessary job that no one really thinks about. Harry measured his ingredients carefully and poured them into a large bowl. It was an easy recipe that called for 9 ingredients. After putting them in, he stirred it into a smooth mixture. He found the recipe easy and couldn't wait for things to get more complicated next year. Before he could proceed, Ron called for his attention. Harry! Ron threw a bag of chocolate chips to him. Put these in the batter, he suggested. Harry opened the bag and shook the small chocolate chips out of the package and into the batter. He stirred it again and then poured the batter into a small round cake pan. He opened the white microwave and put the pan inside. After closing the door, he entered the time and hit start. The pan began spinning around on the microwave's plate. As he washed his hands, Hermione walked towards him with half a sandwich. Harry dried his hand and accepted the yellow ceramic plate. Hermione picked up another plate off the counter. It was an identical plate with the other half of the sandwich. She brought it to Ron, who was still sitting on Snape's desk. A Ravenclaw student quickly opened their microwave door and smoke started pouring out of it. Hermione looked back at the microwave and Ron took the sandwich off the plate. Remembering his job, he stood up and warned everyone of the fire with his mouth full. Snape grabbed a fire extinguisher and rushed over to the microwave. He quickly put out the fire and then opened a window nearby. A couple of students also opened some windows. Ron got back on Snape's desk and went to sleep. The soft hum of microwaves continued as Hermione read a book and Harry lit the candles on his cake. Snape was walking around the room and stopped to talk to Hermione. "I see you're not reading any of your cooking textbooks?" "Nope," Hermione answered, holding her book open. "Besides, I already know how to use a microwave. I even know how to use a stove and an oven." "Yes, and when you do, I call you an insufferable know-it-all." He gave a disappointing glare and turned on his heel. Harry noticed a green plant with lots of vines on the bottom of Snape's robes. Using their thorns, they slowly climbed higher. "Devil's snare!" Hermione noticed what Harry was looking at. They both tried to figure out what to do. "They hate heat!" Harry shouted. Hermione looked at the counter and saw a hairdryer and Harry's lit birthday cake. She grabbed a candle from the cake and rushed behind Snape. She stabbed the robes with the candle, and it started to burn the fabric. He immediately noticed and began panicking. The vines released the black robes and fell to the floor. Harry grabbed a fire extinguisher and put out the fire. White foam smothered the fire and covered the bottom of Snape's robes and the floor. "Don't worry, citizen, you're safe now," Harry said in a superhero pose. "You could have used the hairdryer," he whispered to Hermione. Snape was furious. "Granger," he roared, "I'll have you expelled." "We saved you from that plant thing," Hermione retorted. "Nonsense," Snape yelled. "Come with me." Snape and Hermione left the classroom and he brought her to the gargoyle corridor. They silently walked down the hallway to Dumbledore's office. 500 points from Gryffindor, Snape said before he opened the door. Snape marched up the steps in the headmaster's office as Hermione followed behind him. "Professor Snape, what brings you here with Miss Granger?" Fury filled Snape's eyes. "This delinquent lit me on fire." "First of all, I lit the devil's snare on fire. Second of all, I saved your life," Hermione argued. "If this supposed devil's snare was truly on my robes," Snape said using air quotes, "you would have used anything that conducts heat. I saw that hairdryer. It was unnecessary to use fire." "Well, it worked, and I didn't get a thank you. You didn't thank Harry either, and he put out the fire." "Where was the devil's snare?" Dumbledore asked. "On the bottom of his robes. It looked really dangerous. Harry knew a little bit about them and looked really worried," Hermione answered. Dumbledore looked at the wall in deep thought. "I'd assume you didn't notice the vines, Professor. Miss Granger did act incorrectly as to which tool she would use, but as she said, it worked. Since she saved you, I suggest she go without penalty. Do be careful next time, Miss Granger. As for Harry, I suggest a reward." Snape looked disappointed with Dumbledore's decision, but he couldn't argue with his boss. "Of course. I'll give 100 points to Gryffindor for putting out the fire and knowing about Devil's Snare." "Why did you have a hairdryer in your classroom?" Hermione asked. Snape said nothing but nervously touched his hair. They walked back to the class as silently as before. Chapter 5. Rosmerta+Snape+Garlic Fun. For the next few classes before Christmas break, Hermione and Snape tried to ignore each other. No one knew why Snape had Devil's Snare on his robes or where it came from, but several rumors started to spread. Some people think he's growing and selling the plant to get some extra money. Others believe he's an alien and that his UFO runs on Devil's Snare. Hermione got ready to leave for vacation while Ron chose to stay at Hogwarts with Harry. As Ron and Harry sat in the common room, a bird came flying in with a letter. Hermione stumbled down the stairs with her trunk. "That's probably from Mrs. Weasley, officially inviting us all to stay with them for the break." Harry took the letter and Hermione placed her trunk on the ground with a thud. She looked up at Ron with a puzzled expression. "Are you reading a book?" "Huh? Oh, yeah, it's a picture book. Lots of pictures," Ron replied. "It looks awfully lackluster and thick to be a picture book," Hermione said. "A ton of pictures," Ron continued without changing his argument. Mud?" Harry said while holding the unfolded letter. "This is from Mrs. Weasley, but it isn't an invitation. It's more like an uninvitation." "What?" Hermione grabbed the letter and muttered a few sentences. "We're going to Romania to visit Charlie. We're very sorry, but none of you can come home this Christmas. On the bright side, you're all old enough to go to Hogsmeade." Hermione stared at the words as if she could make them disappear. "Mud," Harry started. "I know you're disappointed, but as Mrs. Weasley said, there's a bright side. We're old enough to go to Hogsmeade." Hermione put the letter down. "What even is Hogsmeade?" Ron looked up from his book to answer their question. "Hogsmeade Village, an old village connected to Hogsmeade Station. You know, the station we arrive at on our way here? It's known for its Christmas atmosphere and specialty shops and pubs." Harry took out his wand and pointed it at Ron. "All right, who are you and where's Ron?" "I am Ron. I can know things." Harry didn't lower his wand, and Hermione wasn't buying it either. She shook her head. Educating us about Hogsmeade and reading a book? I don't even think you're the slightest bit high. Ron shrugged. I'm just sharing what I learned from a sign at Hogsmeade Station. Harry, Ron, and Hermione left the common room and followed the crowds to Hogsmeade Station. As they walked along the platform on their way to Hogsmeade Village, a Dementor ran off the train towards them. They couldn't think of a reason for a Dementor to pay any attention to them, but nevertheless, he charged at Harry. Their wand safety teacher, Remus Lupin, ran after the Dementor, yelling for him to stop. The Dementor tackled Harry to the ground, and they all started barking. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Lupin, and even a few students who were standing nearby. He was stubborn, but his fears eventually consumed him, and he ran off, leaving Harry unharmed. Are you okay, Harry? Professor Lupin asked. Yeah, Harry said as Ron helped him to his feet. You're a lot better than our other wand safety teachers. Oh, thank you. I'm flattered. Well, I'd better be going. He started off in the direction of Hogsmeade and quickly disappeared out of sight. Ron, Hermione, and Harry continued to Hogsmeade Village. It was a small village with one main road and several cottages placed in various spots. Smoke came out of each chimney and rose to the cloudy sky. Every one of the many evergreen trees had strings of colorful lights that made the snow on them reflect the bright colors. They walked through the main street of the village and visited some of the shops. On the side of the street, there was a man selling helium balloons. Harry had an idea and decided to buy one. He borrowed a marker from the man and drew a face with lots of wrinkles and crooked teeth. Harry let go of the balloon and it floated up to the sky. I always wanted to make my Aunt Marge float up to the sky like a balloon, Harry said as he watched the balloon rise. Hermione laughed. I think somewhere in some timeline, you got a chance to do exactly that. They found a pub with 3 broomsticks that had been stabbed into the snow as decoration. They walked inside and looked around. There was wood everywhere. Wooden flooring, wooden walls, wooden tables, wooden chairs, wooden barrels, everything was wood. Brooms lined the walls and mini broom statues were on each table. Customers sat at tables around the room participating in various conversations. An extremely energetic and loud woman with messy blonde hair stood behind the counter. She dropped the rag that she had been cleaning the counter with once she saw her 3 new customers. Welcome to the 3 Broomsticks Pub! Her ear-splitting shriek-like voice alarmed and silenced everyone in the pub. Sweep away all your sorrows because we're not licensed to serve alcohol or food of any kind. Because of that, I'm not kicking you minors out. The quiet mumblings of the customers resumed once she stopped talking. The 3 Hogwarts students reluctantly walked to the counter. Hello, Hermione greeted. Hi, I'm Madame Rosmerta. What can I get you? What do you sell here, citizen? Harry whispered, hoping Rosmerta would take a hint. I'm glad you asked, she shouted. I sell brooms. Sweep away dirt, sorrow, complaints, college rejection letters. Her voice trailed off. Anything that needs to disappear. Brooms? Ron repeated. Yes! We even have the legendary Nimbus 2001s! Can they fly? Harry asked, suddenly intrigued by the brooms on the walls. Rosmerta began a nervous laugh. Well, no. Of course she wouldn't sell flying brooms, Harry, Hermione exclaimed. Nowadays, wizards fly around on vacuum cleaners. We'll have to walk around till we find a pub called the 3 Vacuums. Rosmerta heard the door open and sprung into her greeting mode. Welcome to the 3 Broomsticks Pub! The only pub where you can sweep away all your sorrows! Take some of that sorrow-sweeping action back home with your very own Nimbus 2001! Harry, Ron, and Hermione recognized the new customer. Professor Snape wore his unforgettable disapproving stare even to Hogsmeade. He also brought Darthwing, who wore his own stare. Snape and Pet looked around the room before returning their eyes to Rosmerta. Is this just a broom shop? I was under the impression that the 3 broomsticks served food. Rosmerta shook her head. Not since the roast beef incident, I'm afraid. However, we have many excellent brooms for sale. Oh, I'll be going then, Snape said before leaving the pub. Rosmerta picked up the rag she had dropped earlier and went back to cleaning the counter. I always thought Snape was a vampire, Ron said to Harry and Hermione. Yeah, me too, actually, Hermione agreed. Rosmerta leaned across the counter and into their conversation. If you want, I have garlic. In her hand, she held a head of garlic. Are you suggesting that we use garlic to find out if Professor Snape is a vampire? Harry asked. With villainous lighting on her face and a gleam in her eye, she replied, as long as you tell me how it worked out. I am the protector of Hogwarts. I can't throw garlic at professors, Harry said. But if Snape is a vampire, he's obviously attacking people, Hermione argued. We know he's hungry, Ron started. He might be on his way to an unsuspecting citizen right now. So really, it's your duty to protect them, Hermione concluded as Rosmerta nodded vigorously. You're right, Harry realized. Don't worry, citizen. I will save you. He grabbed the garlic and ran out of the pub with Hermione and Ron following behind him. Remember when you were the voice of reason? Ron asked. What? I still am, Hermione objected. You just convinced Harry that Snape is a vampire and he's about to kill someone. Well, you helped. Harry suggested that they give the garlic to him instead of attacking him with it. They caught up with Snape at a restaurant, sitting across from Darth Wing at a table for two. Next to a window, Snape was rushing through a turkey sandwich. Harry walked to his table while Hermione and Ron hid behind some barrels. "Professor Snape, I wanted to thank you for teaching me how to use a microwave," Harry said. "Here, have some garlic." Someone in the restaurant screamed and ran, but Snape took the garlic. He looked back up at Harry, clearly at a loss for words. Before he could find some, Harry ran out the door. Hermione and Ron stealthily followed as well. Hermione and Ron stealthily left as well. "Now we know," Harry said. "Professor Snape is not a vampire. Only about 1,000,000 other monsters he could be," Ron said as they started their walk back to the Three Broomsticks. A small inn caught their eye and they decided to walk in. At first they thought they had somehow been mistaken about the building being a hotel, but they saw a sign that said Hogshead Inn. The lobby looked like a gym. There was exercise equipment everywhere and the floor was lined with blue mats. Just to get to the front desk they had to go through a maze of blue and gray machines. They rung the bell and waited, wondering if they should leave before meeting someone affiliated with this madness. A door opened and a huge man started walking towards them. He was more muscular than anyone they had ever met. His biceps were the size of watermelons, and he had to be well over 6 feet tall. Are you a giant?" Harry asked as he stood in the man's shadow. The man's laugh shook the room. "No, I'm human. I'm Aberforth Dumbledore, but most people call me Abs. Are you kids sure you're old enough to be checking into a hotel?" "We're just looking around Hogsmeade. Any relation to Albus Dumbledore?" Hermione asked. The giant became angry and he looked away. "He's my brother, unfortunately." Albus Dumbledore is great," Harry said. "You don't like him?" Abs picked up a barbell and started lifting it up and down. "It's a long story," he said, still looking away. "And it's his fault. It's all his fault." There was an awkward pause as Abs lifted the barbell and the 3 students waited at the counter. "We'd better get going," Ron said as Harry and Hermione began to nod. They ran back through the maze of equipment and walked to the Three Broomsticks pub. "So?" Rosmerta asked as they walked in. "What happened?" "Snape's not a vampire," Harry informed. "Nothing really interesting happened. Someone did take off when they saw the garlic, so you might actually have a vampire in town," Ron warned. "Oh, that's probably just Dracula. He's afraid of garlic." Hermione's jaw dropped. "His name is Dracula?" Rosmerta nodded. "He's a weird fellow. I keep telling him he should get out more, vitamin C and all. He just stared at me like I had driven a wooden stake through his heart. Sometimes he's a little too much. Whenever he annoys me, I just throw some garlic at him. Works every time." "That's why you have garlic?" Ron asked. "Yep, I got a whole barrel full. Why else would I have garlic? I'm not allowed to sell food, remember?" They stood aghast at her happy and energetic self. They were about to leave and never come back when they saw a table full of people and animals they knew. A tall man named Rubius Hagrid, a black dog named Fang, an emo bat named Darthwing, a small cat named Professor McGonagall, Remus Lupin, Severus Snape, and Albus Dumbledore. Harry, Hermione, and Ron hid at a table near theirs and listened in. "I know Hogwarts is safe, but is it safe enough?" Lupin asked. "A Dementor attacked Harry Potter today. It attacked on someone's orders." "Most likely Black's orders," Snape added. "We need to get rid of those ruddy Dementors," Hagrid roared. "It's not that easy," Dumbledore started. "They're afraid to go back to Azkaban. I've tried sending them elsewhere, but they feel safe at Hogwarts, even though people keep barking. As long as our extra security is here, the Dementors will stay." Lupin got a dark idea. "We could always—" "I've considered that too, but we wouldn't hear the end of it from the Society for the Promotion of Demented Welfare. They try to shut Hogwarts down," Dumbledore explained. "Then get rid of the security. I've been keeping a close watch. Only danger he's in is the Dementors," Hagrid said. "I have me crossbow in case Black stops by." "We can't let the security go," Dumbledore decided. "I suggest turning your efforts to protecting students from the Dementors." "We know he's targeting Lily and James Potter. Will they be safe?" Snape asked. "Have they relocated?" Lupin asked. "As much as they can. They'll be fine. They know what they're doing," Dumbledore assured. To think he went from being the godfather of his friend's kid to hunting his friend's entire family down, Lupin said as he looked at the floor. "We need to find him. With Sirius Black on the loose, I'm surprised no one has been killed yet." Dumbledore sighed. He picked up Professor McGonagall and carried her out of the pub. Hagrid, Fang, and Lupin followed right behind him. "What are they talking about?" Harry asked. "Uncle Sirius and my dad used to be really good friends. They were big fans of the Godfather movies. Dad told me Uncle Sirius ran around saying things like, 'The family will cupcake you.' That's probably why he was accused of murder, not because he actually committed murder." "Are you absolutely sure Sirius didn't kill anyone?" Hermione asked. "Of course I'm absolutely sure. You've even met him." "Not everyone seems like an evil killer," Hermione said, "and I don't exactly think he doesn't seem like a murderer." "What is that supposed to mean?" Harry snapped. "If Dumbledore and everyone is worried, they've probably got reason to be. He was framed. They're wrong." "How do you know?" "He didn't do it," Harry pleaded. "You're the only one saying that," Hermione argued as Ron stared into space. "Hey, I'm gonna go order a pizza. Cool? Great. That's not true. Even your parents think he's innocent. My parents are insane, Hermione reminded. Who else would send a Dementor to kill you? I'm the protector of Hogwarts. A ton of people want me dead. Tensions ran high several hours later as they walked back to Hogwarts, except Ron, who had remained impartial. It was quiet. It was difficult to push their disagreement out of their minds, but their argument melted away as they entered the cafeteria. A huge Christmas tree, bigger than the 12 trees that had been there before they had left, was standing decoratively behind a large red chair. White snow offset their green color along with the lights and garland draped around them. Harry held his hands out. Snow was actually falling in the room. After sinking lower and lower, the snowflakes disappeared as opposed to melting on his hand. That was the reason why the tables were in their usual dry, shiny brown state. It was a bit disappointing to not be able to feel the cool water that the snowflakes created. Harry longed to go back outside and play in the snow like he had every year before spending his years at Hogwarts. Before spending his summers in hiding. He was pulled back to reality as a man in a red suit appeared and sat in the red chair. "Santa?" Malfoy said incredulously. "Ho, ho, ho," Father Christmas said. Malfoy snapped. "I know your real name, Kris Kringle." "Kid, everyone knows my name, and I have a lot of them. Santa, Father Christmas, Kris Kringle, Saint Nick, Fat Guy with a Beard, Tim Allen." "Santa jerk, last year I asked for a certain gift, and on Christmas last year, under the tree waiting for me was Snow Babby Dream House." "Well, maybe you were on the naughty list. Calling people names doesn't get you on the nice list." "You don't know diddly squat," Malfoy yelled. "You would never put me on the naughty list. Daddy made sure of it." "How did he do that?" Father Christmas asked. "Is he head elf or something?" "No," Malfoy barked. "Daddy is not an elf. He owns his very own hair care product line. Luscious by Lucius." Malfoy charged at Father Christmas with a green pool noodle with a drawn-on snake face. "Assault!" Calmly, Father Christmas held out a hand and put it on Malfoy's dumb face, holding him back. Malfoy threw furious punches that missed him by a foot. "Gutter snipe! Let me get my righteous revenge, you sniveling mouth-breather." The pathetic scene continued. "Not fair! You have to let me beat you in the face!" "Not fair, huh?" Father Christmas asked before putting him in a headlock. "Noogie, noogie, noogie." "Cease and desist! I will not be noogied!" "Alright, will you stop trying to beat me up and demanding Christmas gifts?" "Never!" Malfoy shouted. Before Father Christmas could put Malfoy in another headlock, Malfoy escaped and ran to the safety of Crabbe and Goyle. Upon reaching his destination, Goyle said, "You got beat up by Santa." Malfoy scowled at him. "I didn't get beat up, I got noogied. And barely." He shook his head and began to walk to the doors of the cafeteria. Luna waved cheerfully. "Happy Christmas, Draco." "Bah humbugs," Malfoy huffed. "I always pictured Malfoy as more of a Grinch than a Scrooge," Ron said. "Yeah, but without the redemption," Hermione replied. Harry stood with tears in his eyes. Did Santa just beat up Malfoy? Best Christmas gift ever." Upon second glance, Harry had an epiphany. "Ron, Mud, I think Santa is actually that Norris guy." "Please," Father Christmas replied. "Call me Texas Ranger." He took off his Santa hat and replaced it with a cowboy hat. "Santa is a Texas Ranger?" Colin Creevey asked. "Okay. You seriously think Santa is real?" Hermione asked Harry and Ron. "Of course, Mud. Who else gives us gifts every Christmas?" "Our parents buy them for us," Hermione answered. "You honestly believe a fat man can slide down a chimney?" Across the room, they watched Santa absent-mindedly flex his muscles. "Santa seems pretty ripped to me," Ron said. Hermione stamped her foot. "That's because this Santa is Chuck." "He is not!" someone yelled. "He's Father Christmas!" "Santa isn't real!" Hermione announced. The students roared. "You are literally the Grinch!" someone yelled. "She's a Santa denier!" All around the room, fake snow and figgy pudding began to be hurled at Hermione. Fine, I'll leave." The crowd in the cafeteria cheered as Hermione ducked out of the room. Harry struck a superhero pose. "I apologize for Mud's actions. She is soulless and on probation." "Maybe she was beaten up by Santa as a small child," Ron suggested. Either way, they excused themselves from the cafeteria. Chapter 6. Moaning Joanne's Spirit Animal. As the weeks passed, winter ended and spring began. News about Sirius Black stopped coming and most people started to forget about him. They assumed he had left the country to stay out of Azkaban and that he wouldn't cause any more trouble. Things were back to normal, and Harry was able to completely focus on becoming a great wizard and superhero. On a warm Saturday morning as Ron and Harry were waking up, Harry realized something. "You know who we haven't seen in a while?" "Professor McGonagall in human form," Ron suggested. "Yes, but no. I meant Moaning Joanne. We should go see her. She's probably been lonely." They quickly got ready and went to the common room to get Hermione. Harry continued to walk through the common room as he explained. "We're going to see Moaning Joanne." Hermione promptly closed her book and followed them. Hedwig flew beside them and Rock was securely in Harry's pocket, an idea he had thought of when he spent time with Rue and his kangaroo friends in Australia. Moaning Joanne began to cry as they entered the tiled room. Harry pretended not to notice her animosity and spoke to her anyway. "We're gonna chill in here instead of the common room for a little while." "Why?" Joanne asked. "We don't want you to be lonely," Ron explained. "It was a rhetorical question." "Why?" "A small and simple word to express all of my questions of this world. Why me? Why this? Why you?" They had brought a few chairs in a while ago to set up a room for them to investigate Dudley's death. There was also a chalkboard and several other small things like pencils and chalk. They each took a seat and watched Moaning Joanne, who was sitting on the floor next to the tunnel sink. Last year they found a secret tunnel in this bathroom, and it has yet to be fixed. "So, I was thinking," Harry started as he stared at the ceiling. "I wonder what our animal counterparts are." "Do you mean your Patronuses?" Moaning Joanne asked. "No, I mean our spirit animals," Harry corrected. "It's called a Patronus," Moaning Joanne said through gritted teeth. "I don't think so," Harry replied. "And you're not writing the story, are you?" Moaning Joanne made the closest sound to a growl that a human could make. "Grrr." "Your spirit animal is definitely a dog," Harry announced. "Nah," Ron disagreed. "She's way more like a weasel." "You're more like a weasel," Joanne jabbed. "I'm a Weasley, not a weasel. If my spirit animal was a weasel, then that would be really corny. Ron Weasley the weasel? No one would take that story seriously. Now bathroom girl Moaning Joanne the weasel? That works. Besides, I've already established that I'm a Jack Russell Terrier." "I wonder what my spirit animal is," Harry said wistfully. "A white dog named Crypto," Hermione suggested as Harry remembered she was with them. "A stag." "Your spirit animal is a stag," Moaning Joanne answered, clearly struggling to say the term spirit animal. "Ew, those weird bug things? I hope I don't get stepped on," Harry said with his face scrunched. Moaning Joanne looked incredibly annoyed. "That's a stag beetle. You're a stag. A deer." "Wait, but this is a different world. Maybe here, you're the weasel." "Joanne," Ron started. "Just let it go." "What would I be?" Hermione asked to no one in particular. "A raccoon, the burglar of animals," Ron smirked. "An otter," Moaning Joanne answered without hesitation. "An otter?" Harry repeated. "What, was that your favorite animal or something?" "What? No, I have many reasons for my decisions," Moaning Joanne retorted. "What do you like so much about otters?" Ron asked. "The fact that they live near water, or because you really like the name Musladay?" "Aren't otters really similar to weasels?" Hermione asked. "They are!" Harry exclaimed. "Your spirit animal is almost a weasel. Your spirit animal is definitely a weasel." "Don't worry," Ron said insincerely. "I could easily picture your spirit animal being a toilet." Moaning Joanne pouted until they changed the subject. After sifting through possible conversation starters, Ron remembered something. "They've really done a good job of hiding from you, eh?" he said, looking at Hermione. "Who?" Hermione asked. "Your family." "Oh yeah, them." "You have family at Hogwarts?" Harry asked. "No, you don't," Moaning Joanne answered in disgust. "Closest thing you have to another relative besides your parents is a scrapped idea." Hermione sighed. "I don't like talking about them, but fine. I have 4 cousins who go to Hogwarts. Another one graduated last year. They're all Ravenclaws." "What?" Moaning Joanne asked in confusion. No one hesitated to ignore her, and they instead asked their own questions. "Why didn't you tell us about them sooner?" Harry asked, feeling as though he'd missed out on something. "Because they're crazy!" Hermione exclaimed. "They don't believe in first names. I had to name myself when I was 4. "Is that why your name is so weird?" Ron asked. "Then I renamed myself when I was 9. You think my name is weird?" "Well, your name is Mud," Harry reminded. "You gave me that name!" Hermione snapped. "I did?" Harry asked. "Wow, I'm really creative. I should write a book, perhaps about my life." "No!" Moaning Joanne screamed. "I would be a great author," Harry said, taking offense. "As if you would know anything about writing." Moaning Joanne stared at him, breathing like a hungry tiger. "Anyway," Hermione said slowly, No one in my family has a first name. Using only surnames is not descriptive enough, especially in families. It's mental. So, your parents would only go by Mr. and Mrs. Granger as opposed to having given names? Ron asked. Hermione nodded while Harry looked suspicious. Sounds more like lazy writing to me. To me it sounds like continued lazy writing, Moaning Joanne jabbed. Ha! Harry exclaimed. But for it to be continued, it would have had to be lazy in the first place. Moaning Joanne looked offended for some reason, and Hermione kept talking. I told them I'd curse them if they bothered me. Harry gasped. That's horrible! Before he could educate Hermione about the importance of family, he was distracted by something on the floor. Hey look, a book! He said as he picked up a book that said Tom Marvolo Riddle. Moaning Joanne rolled to her knees and pointed. There's something off about that book. It just absorbs the ink like magic! We've already seen this diary, Ron said. It's obviously a forgery. Nice try, Moaning Joanne, but we're not going into another creepy dark tunnel. He took the book from Harry. Nothing else to do besides chuck it. Let's all throw books at Joanne because she can feel it. 10 points if you can get it through her stomach, 50 points if it goes through her head. I'll go first. Moaning Joanne squeaked and locked herself in one of the bathroom stalls. I was only joking, Ron said before walking to the door. The following day, Harry, Hermione, and Ron were sitting in the common room when Hedwig came to deliver a letter to Harry. Dear Harry Potter, please come visit me in my bathroom today as soon as possible. Sincerely, Moaning Joanne, Harry read. I didn't know Moaning Joanne could send letters. Sounds shady. I don't trust her, Ron said. I agree. You aren't exactly on good terms, Hermione said. At all. I can't ignore it. I'll keep getting more until I'm buried in letters. Trust me, it's not a good idea. They followed Harry to Moaning Joanne's bathroom and walked in. Hey, MJ, Harry greeted. What's up? Harry, I'm so glad you came. I got this idea from a rumor a while back. Moaning Joanne knocked on one of the stalls and a Dementor walked out. Harry's eyes filled with panic and he started to bark. Hermione and Ron barked as they pulled Harry back and ran out the door. They ran for a long time and ended up outside. Harry looked back and noticed the Dementor wasn't following them anymore. They waited a few moments to catch their breath, and then noticed a Quidditch match. They decided to stay and watch. They walked to the bleachers and sat down. It was a Gryffindor and Hufflepuff match, and Gryffindor was losing miserably. From the people in front of them, they heard Gryffindor's seeker hadn't bothered to show up for the game. That's a shame, Harry said to Ron and Hermione. If I was the seeker, I would be there for my team. They sat watching the players run across the field on brooms. Harry Potter, someone said. Harry looked behind him. Oh, Dobby. Hi. Please don't kill me. Dobby tried to protect. Dobby sent Dementor to Hogsmeade to protect Harry Potter. Dobby has to try again. Dobby must protect Harry Potter. Dobby is sorry, not sorry. Another Dementor started charging at Harry. The three of them ran off as they barked. They ran as fast as they could to Hagrid's cabin. Thankfully, he answered the door quickly. Before he could say hello, they darted inside. He noticed the Dementor on his way and slammed the door shut. Blimey, another attack? Actually, it's the second today, Harry corrected. On the right side, we found out why, Hermione started. Dobby sent 2 Dementors and Moaning Joanne sent 1. Sirius isn't after Harry. Probably. That's a relief, Hagrid said, but we're still looking for him. He's done a terrible thing since he escaped. What terrible thing? Ron asked. He hasn't killed anyone else, has he? Hermione asked. No, not yet. He's betrayed his dear friends. Hagrid shook his head in disapproval. Harry was worried about his parents. Dumbledore said they'd be fine, but what if he's wrong? Sirius Black is innocent, obviously. But what about Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon? They're the reason his parents are in danger. There was a knock at the door and Hagrid brought his crossbow to answer. He opened the door and saw a student who was carrying a small snake. Hagrid lowered his weapon and said hello. She held the snake out to Hagrid. I found a snake on the roof. What were you doing on the roof? Hagrid asked. She avoided the question and kept showing Hagrid the snake. Can you take this snake? I don't handle snakes. Head to Slytherin. The snake people will be happy to have him. She took the snake and scurried off in the direction of the castle. Hagrid closed the door and walked back to Hermione, Harry, and Ron. If I did handle snakes, they wouldn't have escaped last year. You know how they escaped? Ron asked. Snape tried to keep it quiet, but he didn't notice Tom Riddle moving the snakes upstairs. Months later, he didn't notice Riddle taking another snake and setting it loose. Luckily, one of his students caught Riddle moving the second basilisk. Several kids ran around Hogwarts looking for the snake and brought it back to their dungeons, Hagrid explained. Chapter 7. Local Bird Crashlands into Local Office of Local Man. Over the next few weeks, more Dementors attacked Harry. Dobby was always close by, hoping they would succeed. Harry, Ron, and Hermione got really good at barking and defending themselves from cloaked monsters. Most of them aren't scary, and one bark will send them running away from Hogwarts. Others take some angry growling. Dementors don't ask questions about who they're supposed to attack or why. They just charge at whomever they're told to. Dobby didn't stop trying to attack by his own hand. There were plenty of times that Dobby carried around a shovel and snuck up on Harry. No matter how many times he was caught and sent to work on Adam and Kevin's weird movie, Dobby came back. He was relentless. As they were walking back to the castle from their Care of Magical Creatures class, the original Professor McGonagall greeted them at the door from inside a large green bush. She had heard about the countless Dobby and Dementor attacks, and she wanted to help. "Psst," she said through the bush. "Professor McGonagall? I thought you left Hogwarts," Hermione said.
No, I've been here all along," McGonagall corrected. "Anyway, I would love to help you with all the recent attacks."
How, violent citizen?" Harry asked.
"By teaching you. I wanted to be the physical arts teacher, but I was already assigned to recycling.
Plus, there isn't a physical arts class." They nodded, skeptical of her motives. "Why are you in a bush?" Ron asked.
It's called stealth, duh. That's the first thing I'll teach you. Lesson 1. Bushes are your friends."
"So, can you teach me how to defend myself other than running and barking?" Harry asked.
"Definitely. For a price. I accept cash and fights as payment."
"Fights?" Ron asked.
"If you make 2 or more people fight, then that is acceptable payment."
Several students gave strange looks as Hermione, Ron, and Harry stared at the bush in disgust. They accepted the lessons anyway and followed McGonagall to a dusty room in Hogwarts Castle. They all stood in front of McGonagall, terrified of what could happen. She held her fists up.
"True heroes fight with their hands. People who use weapons are lame. It's especially good because if you get caught, they can't charge you with battery."
They nodded as she spoke, wondering if she was planning to attack without warning. Surprisingly, she was a relatively good teacher. She told them a lot of nonsense, but her fighting technique looked somewhat accurate. Finally, she sat down on the ground.
"Okay, I've taught you everything I know."
"Thank you," Harry said, feeling much more confident.
"I want to get a bigger spot to teach the physical arts, but I can't find any," McGonagall said. "They're all taken or haunted."
"Well, no sense in using a haunted spot," Ron said. With this new skill, they were able to fight off the Dementors. Some of them became so afraid of Harry, Ron, and Hermione that they would start running at the sight of them. It kept them perfectly in line. Dobby was easy to defeat. They just picked him up and brought him to Adam and Kevin. The Dementors and Dobby aren't a problem. They haven't heard anything about Mr. and Mrs. Dursley or Sirius Black. Hogwarts became calm as the warm summer days turned into hot summer days. Towards the end of the year, everything came back. Harry and Hermione were in the common room working on homework. Hermione was feeding hers to the fire while Harry scribbled answers on his wand safety worksheet. The fire ate the corners of each sheet until only ash remained. The fire happily crackled as it burned each paper beyond recognition. Hermione was almost out of papers when she heard something in the fire. Barking. Harry immediately stood up, trying to figure out where it was coming from. "Fire? Can you talk to us?" Harry asked. "Huh? Oh, yes," the fire answered. "Fire can't talk," Hermione insisted. Harry stared into the fire. "Have you come to tell us something, dear element of fire?" "Is that you, Harry?" the fire asked. "Yes," Harry answered. "The fire knows my name," he whispered to Hermione, who was looking around the fireplace. She noticed some excess space behind the fireplace and a hatch towards the floor. She opened the small door and knelt down to look inside. Sitting on the floor was Sirius Black. "Hi," he said to Hermione. "What are you doing behind the fireplace?" Hermione demanded. "It's a good hiding place." "Get out of there!" Sirius crawled out through the hatch and stood up. Harry looked disappointed. "You mean the fire can't talk?" Sirius shook his head. "No. Sorry, Harry." "Why would you think this is a good place to hide?" "How did you get in here anyway?" Hermione asked. Harry gave a stern look. "Mud, the important thing is that he didn't kill anyone." "That's right," Sirius nodded. "I want to prove my innocence. I spent almost 13 years in that jail, and I don't want to spend more years on the run for something I didn't do." "Okay," Hermione began. "If you're truly innocent, someone else must have committed the crime. Who do you think would frame you?" "I think I know who, but I have to speak with an old friend first. That's who I was waiting for behind the fireplace." He pointed to the crawl space. "I would never harm your parents, Harry." He looked at Hermione. "Or yours." He reached in his pocket and took out a folded picture. As he unfolded it, Harry saw a picture of himself and Sirius from many years ago. Harry was just an infant, but Sirius helped him hold on to a small broom. Sirius gave the picture to Harry and crawled back into the room behind the fireplace. He pulled the small hatch shut and didn't make a sound for the rest of the day. As the hours passed, they wondered who he was meeting with and why. After classes the next day, Harry, Hermione, and Ron went to the common room. Laying down under a chair was a brown rat named Scabbers. Ron looked at the rat. "How do you get out of the closet?" "Why do you keep him in the closet?" Hermione asked. Because he's evil. He's a very bad wizard rat. Ron picked up Scabbers and walked to the stairs. Scabbers started to squeak angrily and bit Ron's hand. Ouch! Ron yelped as the rat jumped onto a nearby chair. He hopped off of it and ran towards the common room door. Ron, Hermione, and Harry chased after Scabbers, but he was too fast. He swerved out of their reach and ran down the halls and down 6 flights of stairs. He found his way outside and showed no signs of slowing down. They all ran through the green grass attempting to catch the rat. They got close and Ron dove to the ground, reaching for Scabbers. He was finally caught and fighting to get out of Ron's hands. They caught their breath and stood up. Before they could start walking back to the castle, they saw Professor Lupin. He turned around and looked at them. "I was just going to get you. Follow me," he said sternly. As they walked behind Lupin, Harry wondered if they had broken some rule he didn't know about. All they did was try and catch Ron's pet. The professor didn't lead them to Dumbledore's office. He instead took them to a large tree called a whomping willow. At the base of the tree, there had always been a patch of discolored grass. Lupin pulled up the discolored grass like a rug, revealing the fact that it was fake. They looked closer and realized how rubbery it looked. The fake grass covered a deep tunnel. It seemed impossible for no one to have noticed this before. Lupin directed everyone to climb in. He reached into his jacket but quickly retreated his hand. He then rummaged through his pockets and found a book of matches. After more rummaging, he found a candle. He lit the candle and led the way. They walked through the dark tunnel, imagining what it could lead to. They walked on and on, following the flickering candle. Finally, they reached a door. Lupin gave the candle to Harry as he fumbled with a set of keys. He found the right one and unlocked the door. He pushed it open and took the candle back as he walked in. It was a rather large room that the candle had a hard time illuminating. It was an old, run-down, dusty shack, complete with all kinds of odd noises. A couple times, Harry swore he had seen something moving. "This is the Shrieking Shack. Here in Hogsmeade, people think it's haunted. No one ever enters. It's the perfect place to hold top-secret meetings," Lupin explained. "How did you find out about it?" Hermione asked. Lupin chuckled. "Back in the day, I researched ghosts. I checked countless creaky old houses and never found one place that was haunted. Since this place was so close to Hogwarts, I offered it as a safe and secret place to the headmaster in exchange for a job when I finally stopped believing in ghosts. Then I told everyone in Hogsmeade that this is the most haunted house I had ever seen. Only a certain kind of person would enter a haunted shack like this." As soon as he uttered those words, they heard someone coming towards the boarded and locked front door. "A snake person. They are the only kind of people who would enter a haunted house," Lupin said quickly. "They must have heard about the rare snakes in here." "Snakes?" Hermione repeated. "But they can't get through the door, right?" Ron asked. "It's locked and boarded." From outside, they heard a chainsaw. Lupin picked up some black cloaks on the ground. "Snake people will always find a way. Here, quickly put these over you." Lupin blew out the candle and disappeared under his cloak, and the rest of them hid under theirs. The snake person cut a Slytherin student-sized hole in the door and climbed through. He put a dark blanket over the hole and restored the darkness. Through a tear in the cloak, Harry immediately recognized him as Draco Malfoy. He started looking for snakes, and Harry got an idea. The darkness makes dark colors disappear and light colors fairly visible. Harry quietly stood up and took the cloak off of his head. His body blended in with the darkness and he looked like a floating head. Malfoy picked up the snake he found and turned around. He saw Harry's decapitated head and screamed. With the snake, he ran out of the shack. "All right, I got rid of him," Harry announced. Hermione and Ron stood up as Lupin relit the candle. "Good job. Stay here. I'll be back." Lupin went back through the tunnel door and shut it behind him. They stayed in the shack for a very long time. They finally heard someone from the tunnel and were relieved to receive further instruction and explanation. Instead of Lupin opening the door, someone they had never seen entered. He had rough, long blonde hair and blue eyes. His face strongly reminded Harry of a rat. "Hiya, friends," he greeted in a friendly tone. "Did you eat Professor Lupin?" Harry asked, noticing the person was overweight. He laughed loudly before answering. "No, of course not." He continued to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha." They couldn't help but think he was being fake. "I'm Peter Pettigrew." "Oh yeah," Harry remembered. "My dad talked about you once. He and his friends tried avoiding you, but they never could." Pettigrew initially looked angry, but he softened his face. "Anyway, I have some bad news. I had to go into hiding a long time ago because someone tried to kill me. Being here is really risky, but I need to tell you the truth." Okay, ratty citizen," Harry replied. "Sirius Black kept a lot of secrets. He knew how to act all nice and innocent, but he killed those 12 people for no reason. He tried to kill me too, but luckily I was able to fake my own death and escape." "He did not," Harry shouted. "He's got you under his spell. He's using magic, Harry. Don't you know what he did once he got out of jail?" Harry shook his head. "He betrayed your parents. He gave their location to the Dursleys." Harry looked like he had been stabbed in the back. "That's how Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon found them?" "Yes," Pettigrew answered. "Why?" Harry demanded. "I don't believe it." There are loose ends. They knew about his crimes. The tunnel door flew open and Lupin walked in with Sirius Black. Pettigrew, if you're going to lie, at least make it slightly convincing, Lupin said coldly. Pettigrew glared at them. What's the truth, then? Hermione asked. This rat is a liar. I imagine everything he said was either a complete lie or he switched around the names, Sirius said. Somehow Scabbers looked offended. Who killed the 12 muggles? Ron asked. Rat boy Peter Pettigrew, Lupin answered. I did not, Pettigrew protested. You gave the Dursleys Lily and James Potter's location. You killed 12 people, you faked your own death, and then you framed me, Sirius growled. It ends here. He reached for something in his coat. Wait, Harry yelled. Don't use your magic to kill him. That's not the superhero thing to do. Fine, we'll take him to jail, Lupin sighed. Pettigrew bolted for the door to Hogsmeade Village and broke it down. He escaped the shack and ran through the streets of Hogsmeade. They stood dumbfoundedly in the room that Pettigrew had just escaped. Harry? Sirius started. Yeah? Harry asked, staring blankly at the doorway. Next time, let me kill him. Okay. They went back through the tunnel and headed to the castle to discuss things with Dumbledore. Even though they were each deep in thought about what had happened, they all loudly barked down the halls to get by the Dementors. Students whispered as they caught a glimpse of the escaped convict. The brown gargoyles stared at them as they walked toward the doors at the end of the dark corridor. They entered through the heavy doors and caught Dumbledore off guard. Fawkes flew out of the room as Dumbledore stood at his desk, staring at Sirius, a hint of panic setting in. Have no fear, citizen. Uncle Sirius is innocent, Harry announced. Professor Lupin took a few steps forward. We were wrong. Luckily, the Grangers have been investigating this for years. They invited me over to discuss the betrayal of Lily and James Potter. You were talking with my parents? Hermione interrupted. Yes, Lupin answered quickly. You really should return home now and then, or at least read their letters. I don't want to, Hermione said honestly. But you really should, Lupin strongly suggested. Anyway, they've been working on this for all these years since he's an old family friend, and they wanted to do something good for a change. Yes, of course, Dumbledore nodded. And? They managed to convince me to look into Peter Pettigrew. We never liked him, Lupin continued. And I smelled a rat that fateful day, Sirius growled. They held on to a hunch that Pettigrew was still alive, Lupin said. What was the hunch? Dumbledore asked, getting a little more comfortable with Sirius in the room. Nothing really, he just seemed guilty, Lupin explained. They used their connections to keep an eye out for him. Finally, they found him, stuffing his face at a Burger Queen. They told Sirius to escape so that he could capture Pettigrew and bring him to the police, which would prove his innocence. Unfortunately, the rat was too smart, Sirius said in disgust. Somehow he found Lily and James Potter's location and threatened to leak it if I came near him. I stayed away. I tried to think of a plan. The rat leaked it anyway. Must have had a good reason, whatever it was. Knowing him, it could have been McClown's coupons. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon, Harry realized. They would offer a lot of money for my parents' location. After a private meeting, we decided to bring Harry and his friends in on what was going on, since, Dumbledore nodded as Lupin kept talking. While Sirius and I were out of the room, Pettigrew, the rat, showed up and tried to put the blame on me, Sirius interrupted in a meaner tone. He tried to convince them that I was an evil murderer and that he had to go into hiding to be safe. Peter Pettigrew is really alive? Dumbledore asked. Yes, Hermione answered. We all saw him. He definitely did it, Ron agreed. Harry nodded. Uncle Sirius is innocent. Something outside Dumbledore's window caught Harry's attention. A bird was flying straight towards the closed window. Dumbledore noticed Harry's faraway gaze and looked outside. He saw the bird and quickly opened the window. As it got closer, they heard it singing loudly and saw that its eyes were closed. He flew through the now open window and crash-landed on Dumbledore's desk, rolling into a cup of quills and knocking it onto the floor. The sudden noise startled Scabbers and he bit Ron's hand. After hearing Ron yelp, the tiny gray owl stood and shook his feathers. He flew towards Ron, picked up Scabbers, and carried him out of the window. They curiously watched the owl as he dove down and dropped Scabbers near the ground. He went back up to Dumbledore's office and started to fly around Ron. He landed on his shoulder and leaned against his cheek. Perhaps you should keep him to make sure he doesn't injure himself out in the wild, Dumbledore suggested. Ron tried looking at the owl, who was still affectionately leaning against him. He got rid of Scabbers. He's the greatest owl in the world. Aw, he's really cute, Hermione said as she pet the small owl's feathers. Dumbledore cleared his throat. Ahem. About Sirius Black. Oh, right, Harry said, looking away from the grey bird. I don't think the sighting of Peter Pettigrew is enough to clear your name, Dumbledore said empathetically. Personally, I do believe you. Because of that, I can get you a horse and look the other way. Thank you, sir, Sirius exclaimed gratefully. I'll help in any way I can, Lupin said. I'm sure we can find some more old friends willing to help our cause. Take all the time you need. I've become very good at hiring wand safety professors, Dumbledore commented. Hold on, Harry started. If you two were both friends with my dad, then why did he choose Uncle Sirius to be my godfather? Harry asked. They weren't going to have a godfather originally, but they decided to since it's been my dream to be a godfather. Like the movies, Sirius answered. Hermione looked confused. Shouldn't you have recognized Professor Lupin's name if he was friends with your dad? I did, Harry said bluntly. I wouldn't follow a stranger into a dark tunnel. That would be a horrible idea. Sirius yelped. He cleared his throat. Sorry about that. A bittersweet conclusion came, and they walked out of the office and into the gargoyle corridor once more. Soon enough, Sirius accepted a horse from Hagrid and left Hogwarts. Unsure of when he'd return, they went back inside to the house championship. The cafeteria was full of ecstatic students and professors who had just found out the Dementors and guards would be leaving. The end-of-term feast was sitting in front of them as Dumbledore made his end-of-year speech. I'm sure you all are eager to hear the House Cup winner and to eat. This year, the house with the most points is Hufflepuff. This was our year, Ron said. Actually, it makes sense considering all the things we did, Hermione reasoned. Nope, I can't accept this, Harry decided. It's rigged. Right, Gryffindor? Rigged! Rigged! Gryffindor started chanting with Harry. Rigged! 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 Even Ron's new owl started hooting in support. Guys! Hermione shouted. This is exactly the stuff that makes us lose. Harry stood up in his favorite superhero pose. Don't worry, fellow Gryffindors. I vow to make sure we win next year. How are you going to do that? Ron asked. Harry smiled. I have an idea. The next morning, they went to Hogsmeade Station with all of their belongings and got on the train. Once they sat down, Ron opened a new bag of drugs. The train left Hogsmeade and started its trip back to King's Cross Station. The end. I hope you enjoyed Harry Potter and the Barking from Azkaban. Want to hear more about that plan of Harry's? All will be revealed in Harry Potter and the Ballot Box of Fire.